Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Monday, April 26th, and we have a great lineup of interviews and content and so forth for you to listen to and watch today. We hope you're well. Work is good. Maybe you've gotten vaccinated already, and your life's getting back to whatever new normal is. But we'd love to have you. We love having you on here, and thank you very much for joining with us. No matter whether it's on our OTT channels on Apple TV and Roku or Amazon Fire, or on our websites, DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal. Maybe you're watching this on Facebook Live or LinkedIn Live or Twitter or YouTube. Wherever it is, thanks for watching. Let me tell you what we've got in store for you today. I've got a couple of interviews I want to talk to you about. The first one is with Erin Orzelle. He's the CEO and founding member of Argonne Security. And Argonne Security is the first unified security solution protecting the integrity of your software throughout the entire DevOps pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. Squarely in the DevSecOps space, and Erin is a pretty savvy player, and he's going to tell you all about it. After Erin, I'm really happy to have as my guest Erin Riley, who's the Chief Social Impact Officer at Twilio. What's a Chief Social Impact Officer, you ask? Good question. Erin gave us some really good answers. I boiled it down to, Erin says, she helps make capitalism a force for good in society. It's more than that even, though, and she's a really great person, great interview. I think you're going to enjoy it. After Erin, we'll be back with Jeff Hausman, who's the VM and VP for Operations Management at ServiceNow. ServiceNow recently released Agent Client Collector, a new unified agent solution that gives teams the ability to capture and monitor data, as well as software, hardware, and cloud infrastructure. It's a unified agent that takes the place of what were multiple agents in the past, and of course we all want less agents. So good conversation with Jeff. After that, we have an interview with my friend Charles Karlagi. Charles, of course, is an analyst with Accelerated Strategies Group, and ASG just did a report sponsored by CData on the rise of the citizen developer and low-code, no-code, and that's a really hot area these days. Charles is going to tell us about that. After that, I'm really happy that we're going to kick this week off with part one of the latest Haunted Hacker episode with Mike Jones. Mike's guest this week is Kim Kennedy, Enterprise Security Specialist. I think Haunted Hackers are great. If you're into cyber, even if you're not, give that one a listen. It's a lot of fun. After that, we'll be turning things over to something old from our Cybersecurity Summit, which was about 6 weeks ago. This is a great panel around policy as code and how this impacts security. We'll discuss state-of-the-art in policy as code, current innovations, future trends. We've got Chenzi Wang and Gadi Avran. You probably know Chenzi from, if you've been watching our show before. Chenzi's an amazing person, a PhD, VP, former VP Forrester, senior C-level people at several, both large enterprises as well as security startups, and of course now the founder of Rain Capital, women-owned VC firm. But Gadi is another friend of mine from the security world, and equally as impressive a background, and it's a really great presentation that Chenzi and Gadi did, so check that one out. After that, we're going to turn things over to the one and only Charlene O'Hanlon, my Chief Content Officer and Editor-in-Chief here at MediaOps, as well as co-anchor for TechStrong TV. Charlene's going to bring you the news from around our websites today, as well as a preview of the great webinars we have on store this week. In addition to that, Charlene has two interviews of her own. One with Jack Ham, CISO and VP of Infrastructure at Gigamon, about how real-life experiences have improved his position as a CISO, and why a team of diverse thinkers and security practitioners is key to effectively combating security risk. Also, Charlene has another interview with Bert Kashian, co-founder and CEO of Secure W2. As more employees return to the office, which devices can return to the office and which ones need to be left at home? We're going to find that out over the next couple months, but Bert's going to tell us more about that. And then after that, I think we're going to head over for the Analyst Corner, where Mitch has an interview with Jeff Morris, Vice President of Product and Solutions Marketing for Couchbase, NoSQL. And they're going to detail results of a survey that they did around the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, the impact of COVID-19 on IT. So that'll be a good one. And then I'll be back to wrap it up. Got a great Monday lined up for you. Let's get busy. You got a whole week of work ahead of you. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our first guest. Our first guest today is Erin Orzelle, CRO, founding member, Argonne Security. It's at argonne.io. And they are a unified security solution protecting the integrity of your software throughout the entire DevOps pipeline. Let's now go to my interview with Erin Orzelle.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another segment for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Erin Orzelle. Is that correct, Erin?
Yes.
Okay, and Erin is a co-founder CRO with Argonne. Erin, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yep.
Nice meeting you again.
Nice to see you again. Erin, we had your co-founder on, it's got to be almost a month now, quite frankly, right? And, fairly new company out of Israel and exciting stuff. But I don't, you know how people need to see things a few times before it sinks in. So if you don't mind, let's start with a little company background, maybe a little bit of your background. And then we could jump into some news you've got around surveys and what's doing in the market.
All right. So I'll start with a short background of myself. So I've been in the last 15 years at Checkpoint, running strategic sales and partnership there. So I have a long history in security, helping secure some of the largest companies worldwide. And basically, in the beginning of this year, 2021, I joined the two founder of Argonne, and we launched Argonne, which main goal is to secure the development environment space and providing end-to-end security for CI/CD pipelines, something that we see as a critical attack surface in today's IT landscape.
Absolutely. We have been, so here at DevOps.com, we've covered what we call DevSecOps, shift left, the whole, and that's where the action is in that, right? It's all in that integration, CI/CD, right? Continuous integration deployment pipeline. Some people now GitOps, right? As we continue to, a lot of it going on there, especially with the move to Kubernetes. And again, I recognize that you're the CRO, and we're not here to dive into the technical, but talk to us a little bit about how you protect that CI/CD pipeline.
Okay, so basically, when we look today at the CI/CD pipeline, and we talk with many customers and meeting a lot of CIOs and DevOps teams, what we see is that the thing that is missing in the market is the understanding of the pipeline as an end-to-end holistic process. And what is unique about what we are doing is basically we're not looking at a segment of security like maybe scanning or of containers or scanning of code and things like that, but looking at the pipeline as a process connecting to the environment themselves, the connection between the environments, the users that are running on the pipeline, the DevOps scripts that actually runs the process, and eventually also we're looking at the source code itself running in those tools, making sure that we secure all those aspects and ensuring that the code you committed to the source code management system actually is the code that will be deployed in production without any tampering and changes.
Which, of course, we've seen the consequences of that here in just the last few months, without mentioning names. But we need that, these supply chain attacks, if you will. Let's leave it at that. Supply chain attacks are real, and they're creating havoc in many of our systems out there. And then I also wanted to mention the website for Argon is I'm confused. Argon AI or IO?
IO. Argon.io.
Argon.io. And that's where we can get the information. Okay. All right. With that out of the way, Ron, let's now dig in a little. You guys recently did a survey and have some findings, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. So basically, following this large supply chain attack that happened at the end of last year, what we did together with Hypervise Venture conducted a survey that tried to understand the state of security of development environment across enterprises all over the world. And basically, we run interviews with more than 200 CISOs, application security manager, DevOps, and cloud security in order to map what's going on today and also understand what are the challenges that organizations are facing in securing those development environments. Now, some of the findings are probably will not be surprising, but there are some things that are really surprising, and I'll be happy to share some of them in a second. So,
great.
I think that one of the things that we see as I think something that already almost done in the industry is that 90% of people that we talk to already deployed those CI/CD tools as part of their software development backbone. So we're talking about at least 2 tools that deployed, and this means that the adoption of those tools is very high. On the other end, comparing to this adoption, most of the security people we talk to have very low confidence in their ability to secure those environments, and even in having visibility to what's going on in this space. So it's like high adoption, very low security confidence in that.
It is, and there's a lot of reasons for that, though, right? Some obvious, some not so obvious.
Yeah.
Some of it, quite frankly, is just, I don't want to say distrust. It's not a lack of trust, but it's more a lack of familiarity, more a lack of communication between the security teams and the DevOps and developer teams.
Yeah,
right?
Agreed.
One
of the main let's say reason that security see as in their inability to secure it was the disconnect between the security teams in the IT and the development teams in the R&D organization that basically don't talk and don't share those information, so they don't have visibility and they cannot secure something they don't know even where it is and exists there.
Absolutely. And this brings up, I think, a big trend that we see in DevSecOps, which is security vendors, DevSecOps vendors, making security tools for the developers in the R&D team, right? Which is, this didn't happen 5 years ago even.
Yeah, I think we see that also in the very large security vendor that all shifting left and starting to try to do that as well. So it's not only the startups.
Yeah, I know that's definitely the trend. You know, I guess the question is, do developers want to use them, right? And if they're geared to the developers and everything, look, I'm not from the school that says developers don't care about security. I think everyone cares about security. It's just a question of how much you're willing to do for security, right? How much time are you going to take? How much effort are you going to make? And the time and effort they may be willing
to put into it is not the same as
a security person's going to put into it, and for obvious reasons. But anyway, good finding. What else? Give us some other findings from the survey if you can.
Basically, we already covered it, but one aspect of why it is so complex to secure those environments. So first is, of course, the lack of cooperation between those teams, the security and the development. The second thing is what you mentioned about security team don't see security as one of their main KPIs, and their focus is on releasing software fast and releasing it the right way, and security is one of the last things on the list. But another thing that we need to take into consideration here is the complexity of the CI/CD pipeline. Yeah. When we look at what we found in the market, there are more than 100 different tools that you can use. Now, the scripts themselves and the pipelines are built by the various development teams. And in many cases, even within the same organization, the two pipelines will have different rules, different process, and different scripts, and this create a very big complexity. And without a standard in the market today, each organization trying to apply some point solution here or some scanning or a process there to try to mitigate some of the risks that they understand. So I think those are the three main challenges that organizations see today and really prevent them from having the right security level for their pipelines as they do on other areas.
Agreed. I think that's absolutely a piece of it. Again, I think some of the forward-looking organizations are recognizing this and adapting, right, and changing these views and ways of how we do things. Unfortunately, I think that's the leading edge. There's still a lot of people
lagging on that.
And, not to put a plug in, but every year at RSA conference, for instance, right, for the last 6 years, we run the DevSecOps event. And I've seen this like literally change before my eyes, right? When we first started, we would get 200 people. And it was split between some of the DevOps people would show up just out of curiosity, and there was mostly security people. And their attitude was the developers didn't care about security, they didn't want to know what DevOps was, and all of that. Last year, we did it in person, right before COVID. That was the last conference I went to. We had over 1,000 people.
Wow. Nice.
About 400 DevOps, what I would consider DevOps people, 600 and something security people. But it was real. People are now starting to, I always say that the security community and the DevOps tribe coming together to work on these things.
Yeah.
This year for RSA is in May, and we're doing, it's virtual this year, but we're doing the DevSecOps event the Wednesday of RSA week, and we're getting phenomenal speakers submitting, people registering, because I do think, I'm not saying we're there or this battle's won, but we're starting to see the momentum really pick up for this kind of cooperation that's going to be needed, for this kind of working together that we need to be doing. So, I'm a glass half full kind of person.
Yeah, no, me too. I can tell you that I think the latest breaches that we see regarding source code leak and the supply chain attacks really put the spotlight on that and really force organization to start talking about it and make sure that they're not leaving a huge open back door to their organization. And even when we talk today with CISOs, I see that at least, I would say 30% of them already working on implementing some security measures over the pipeline. Obviously, a lot of the DevOps that we talk with are already like understand what we're talking about and are engaged and want to see what we can have, because it's a peace of mind for them as well. So I think that slowly we are getting there. The awareness is getting much bigger in terms of the need to secure those development environments and the risk that they might create for organization that will not secure them properly.
Agreed. I agree with you. I mean, it's good. From where I sit, and I've been at this 8 years now, right? It's encouraging. It's progress. I'm not saying the battle's won or anything, but unfortunately, in any war, there's always casualties too.
Right. And
we've seen some casualties. Anyway, what else on the survey? Surprising, not surprising that you want to share?
So I can tell you a couple of things that is very encouraging that at least I see. Something like 70% of the organization that we talked to over the survey are planning to implement and deploy CICD security in the next 24 months. So this shows a positive trend and shows that there is high awareness for the need and for the damages. I think that when you ask them, what you're going to do, most of them today understand that what they need is complete visibility over the process and to look at an holistic security solution that really have a lot of contextual value. Because if we look at the large latest supply chain attack, if it wasn't being detected by one of the customers that found it, this breach could have lasted for like years and the damage could be like phenomenal. So it is very hard to identify an attack against those environments. There is no visibility. The tools are built, they are not designed securely. They're designed to be open and fast and to encourage collaboration. So those environments are really open and risky. And I think that the notion now is that people understand that. The latest supply chain attack really helped them understand that the point solution here or some scanning there will not close this big gap. And I think we see a lot of good intentions on the security and DevOps side to close that. And I can tell you that when we talk to customers, 80% of the meetings, the DevOps and the security teams are sitting together and challenging us on DevOps best practices and security best practices. And this is very encouraging for me because now the awareness is there, easier to move them to really deploy and implement this.
Amen. Right?
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
A good thing. So, sometimes it takes... I learned this, I started a few security-based companies over the years, and I learned this the hard way, is sometimes your best customer is someone who's unfortunately been breached or hacked, and you get a big attack like we've had the last couple attacks here, or the ransomware that we're seeing, and it takes something that bad to get people to take this much more seriously and do something about it. So that's a great thing. We're almost out of time around already, believe it or not. The time goes quickly. Beyond the survey, though, what else is going on with Argonne?
So I think that one of the things that we're going to do in the next few months is really put a lot of enhancement into the platform that will enable customers to implement their own rules into the system and really build a stronger connection between security and DevOps and enable DevOps to implement DevOps best practices that are really needed to automate a lot of the activities that they are doing over the pipelines, to save a lot of time on their daily routines, but also to make sure that if there is a misconfiguration or a breach, the security solution can automatically close it and report to them that, for example, someone opened a repository to the public, the system closed it immediately, an alert, so we will check why this happened and make sure it will not happen again. So a lot of automation, a lot of speed, and basically creating security is an enablement that will run alongside the DevOps processes and basically enhance them and enable them to reduce the risks and mistakes over their processes as well. And by this connection between DevOps and security, I hope we will be able to bring security much faster to the development space, to the development environments, and close this gap that we identify, almost a year ago. And there's still a lot of work to be done there, but I think we are on the right track to achieving that.
Yeah. So that's something, Erin, it took me a long time to recognize, especially sitting where I sit now, is that we live in a bubble where DevOps, DevSecOps, the kinds of things you're talking about, we see this every day, and so we think everybody knows, and everybody's doing this, or everybody should be doing it. And what we've got to recognize is, that whole crossing the chasm model. There's early adopters, there's early mainstream, there's later mainstream, there's laggards, and it takes years, unfortunately,
for everyone to,
for the end of the train to catch up. And it's just a fact. We can try best we can, but it's just a fact. Anyway, hey, we're about out of time. I want to thank you for coming on and joining us and getting us the survey information. Best of luck with Argonne.
Thank you very much.
You'll come back, and hopefully maybe we'll
be able to do a security conference in person somewhere soon.
And we can
I hope
hook
sooner
up that.
rather than later. Yeah, I hope sooner rather than later. I'm a follower of your Security Boulevard and other sites, so I enjoy being here, and thank you very much, and looking forward for our next session.
Good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Argonne.io. Check them out.
DevSecOps here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
My next interview is one of my favorite ones that I've done here in weeks and months. It features Erin Riley, who we previously had on, Erin, from Twilio. She's the Chief Social Impact Officer, and we spoke about how Twilio is helping organizations get COVID-19 vaccines out to mass amounts of people. But I asked Erin to come back because I wanted to dive more in on what exactly is a Chief Social Impact Officer and what's their impact, no pun intended. Erin is a accomplished Silicon Valley veteran. She's worked at some of the largest unicorns in the tech space, and she gives us a really great picture into what a Chief Social Impact Officer does. So here now is my interview with Erin Riley of Twilio.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another TechStrong TV segment. I've got a really good segment, a little different, we're going to do today. My guest for this segment is Erin Riley. Erin has been on our show before, but For those who may not know, she is the Chief Social Impact Officer at Twilio. And first of all, Erin, welcome. Welcome to TechStrong TV. It's great to have you back on.
Thanks for having me.
Great. Erin, the last time you were on, we actually had a really good conversation about how Twilio is helping so many organizations with their COVID vaccine programs and just general health kind of innovations, healthcare innovations in dealing with large numbers of people, of the public. And it kind of fell under your auspices as Chief Social Impact Officer. And we had a great conversation on that. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out on Digital Anarchist. Just look up Twilio or Erin's name, and it's on TechStrong TV as well. But Erin, I wanted to talk to you today, take it up a notch. Chief Social Impact Officer. You're the first one I've ever met. And so I apologize if I'm awkward about it. But tell our audience, what is this Chief Social Impact Officer role? How did you come to it? What do you see? What gets you excited about it? How does Twilio view it? Right? What about beyond Twilio? How are you seeing it play out? In corporations around the world. Go ahead.
That was about 4 questions. So we'll start with the first one with, so Chief Social Impact Officer, we as a company really want to make sure that on the whole, the world is a better place because Twilio exists. And that is actually everyone's job at the company. But as my job as being a Chief Social Impact Officer is to make sure that social impact is woven into every part of our company. And it is not some siloed thing over there that one department is doing. And that social impact is really central to the company. And frankly, I report into our CEO and am part of our small executive team for precisely that purpose, making sure that both what we are doing, overall strategy in the company, has that lens of how are we building a stronger community and environment through our overall company efforts, but also the reverse, making sure that everything we do to create a better impact and make the world a better place is really flowing with the momentum of the company overall and really using our unique assets.
Agreed. That sounds great. So how is this your first gig as a Chief Social Impact Officer, or have you been in this role in other places?
Well, my entire 25 plus year career has been focused on using the unique assets of a company to do good in the world. And so before Twilio, I was at Google. Before that, I was at Yahoo. Before that, I was at some other companies. And so I have always been focused on really sort of connecting business and social impact together. This is the first time I have had the title with chief in it, of Chief Social Impact Officer. So as you alluded to, it is a newer trend to see this type of a title and this level of executive leadership in the field. But it's a role that has existed for 20 years. But it's evolved a lot, and we can definitely talk about what I've seen in the evolution, if that's interesting to you.
It is. I mean, look, I look at Google, for instance, right? And, the Google mantra, do no evil, right? I think everyone in tech has heard that. We don't always believe it, but we've heard it, right? And in a way, you weren't responsible for that, but you were at Google, I'm going to assume, making sure that do no evil mantra found its way into what Google does across
the portfolio. Am I right? Wrong?
Well, I guess let me tell you about sort of the 3 waves of social impact that I have seen in the history, not just my history, but predating me by far. I would say the first wave is what I call the Rockefeller age, which is make your money however you are going to make it, and then go and do good afterwards. The second wave I would call sort of the corporate philanthropy wave, where companies really wanted to, put social impact protected from getting influenced too much by the overall business drivers. And it was a great idea to basically try and protect it, and so that the social impact can do all the good, and not get muddied by the drivers and the priorities of the company. However, there were problems with that, because that made it so that the social impact was not benefiting off of the momentum of the whole rest of the company, but also that the social impact work wasn't making sure that it was making its way into every part of the company. And then I would say we're in the third wave, which Twilio is an example of, where social impact is embedded into the central purpose and force of the company, and that we are not seen as a cost center. We are not, which previous, I think, social impact programs and a lot of social impact programs and companies these days are a cost center, and people talk about, maybe the benefit to employee loyalty or the benefit to the brand, which are definitely important. But one thing that we add to it in the model that Twilio has created is that we are also able to provide revenue growth and profit. So therefore, that virtuous cycle between business success and social impact is tighter. So that's what I would say. We've evolved, and now we see a tighter connection. And so that the more social impact we create, the more business success. The more business success, the more social impact.
Great. I love that the timeline too. I do a similar thing with open source. I think we've seen 3 ages of open source, but that really brought it home for me. So, we gave the example of the COVID-19 vaccine help, right, that Twilio is offering. These kinds of social impact campaigns or activities, top down, bottom up, someone comes here and said, Erin, here's a great way for us to do good in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it more, top down where hey man, here's a real problem spot. How can we as a company help this? And it flows from that. Or maybe it's both. It's a two-way street.
So the area that I focus on, we look at it as sort of a social impact business. So what it means is we lead with looking for opportunities to create social impact in the world that are done in a way that still provides business success and business value. And so to answer a question, we look at it through that lens. So I'm not sure it's top down or bottom up, but more market opportunity, but not market opportunity, impact opportunity. And so basically our team, but across the company, we were seeing this opportunity around COVID vaccines. And we know that Twilio's technology really is at the heart of solving a lot of the logistical challenges in COVID vaccines, getting an appointment, finding out where that appointment is, being reminded of it, but also getting rid of the myths and hesitancy around vaccines so that folks could really get more vaccines taken. And so we saw that opportunity, and then we created a cross-company team that collaborated across all of our areas of the company to basically go out and tackle that impact opportunity. So I would say, if I had to choose between bottoms up and top down, it was more sort of like middle of the company. Pardon?
We call it middle out.
Yeah.
So from the middle out.
Yes, exactly. Because that was our job, to basically look for these impact opportunities, and vaccine delivery was a great impact opportunity that also had business benefit.
Excellent. We're doing stuff here, looking at kind of the new world, the new normal, and the way teams operate. And, we're actually, we haven't announced it yet, but we're going to do something in what we call the CXO category, because we think that, yesterday's C-levels are not today's and certainly not tomorrow's C-level areas. There are areas of concentration, areas of business, areas of the world we live in that are being elevated to C-level importance. So it used to be, like, for instance, all IT came under CIOs. That's not true today, right? There's chief digital officers and chief product officers and chief transformation officers and chief technology officers are doing what CIOs did. Anyway, certainly chief social impact officer, another example of something that's being elevated to this C-level. Right, and when it's akin to making something a cabinet level, secretary cabinet level in the federal government, right? You do it because we're saying that's how important this is, right? That it has to answer directly to the chief, to the CEO in this case, not the president, but to the chief, and it's at the very top of our hierarchy. So, are you familiar or aware of other companies that have elevated this role to a C-level?
Yes, I am. I think their Salesforce has a chief philanthropy officer as well as a chief impact officer.
Really? Okay.
And BetterUp just elevated and hired a chief impact officer as well. There are other, there's a chief sustainability officer at HP. There's several that are, that do have this title. And I agree with you that it indicates a shift in what we consider important in business, because, for better or for worse, capitalism is one of the most powerful forces in this world. And business is that, delivery of capitalistic growth. And more and more companies and more stakeholders are recognizing that that we need to deliver more than profit, that we also need to be delivering the strengthening of our communities and our environment. And so I think this chief social impact officer that is being elevated is saying, hey, this is a opportunity for us to deliver what's needed from capitalism and really make sure that capitalism is a force for good in the overall world. And we need an owner to really make sure that that's being driven throughout the company. Just similar to the other examples that you mentioned for other C-level executives that needed to drive that transformation through the entire company. Agreed.
I like that. You brought up the C word, capitalism, and I agree with you. As a entrepreneur, I'm not against capitalism either, but certainly we need to be mindful of, because of capitalism, because of the profit motive, companies do things that are in their self-interest. Fair, right? And so in doing social impact, does it enter into your mind that, are we doing this only or solely in the company's self-interest, or does the common good, the greater good, outweigh the company's best interest? Or because are the company's best interest always in line with what's good for the greater, common good, if you will? Does there come a point where they diverge?
I think what you've touched upon is one of the areas that we really have realized is that doing things out of the goodness of your heart is not enough. And when I used to lead environmental sustainability at Yahoo, and we reached hundreds of millions of people around changing their life practices around sustainability, if we rely on people to do it out of their goodness of heart, it's just not going to go far enough. And I would say with a company, it's taking it one step further and saying that companies still do need to deliver shareholder value. So the job of social impact leaders increasingly is to find out the ways that social impact and the business drivers are aligned. And I think that's consistent. Any other chief social or chief CXO needs to do that too. We need to talk about how digital transformation also aligns with what is going to happen in the rest of the company, and drives the purpose. But I do see that when we look for that alignment, we can do more, both to drive business value, but also to be able to drive better growth, impact in society and the environment. So I think the important role is to make sure that those are aligned. Because if you're relying on a company or people to do it out of the goodness of the heart, I just don't think it'll go far enough for what we need in society.
Agreed. I great answer. Erin, we're past our time. I apologize. I know this it goes too quick. But you know what? I just wanted to say that as the first Chief Social Impact Officer I've met, you've made a great impression and given me a good feeling about what this role does and what it should do, and how it can be a force for good in the world, as well as in, just individual organizations. So, kudos to you. Keep up the great work. I think the world's a better place for these kinds of roles, right? And you can make it a better place. So keep doing what you're doing, and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on so that more companies can know about how they can really create a role like this, but even just make sure that doing good and business success can go hand in hand.
You're right. You could build it into your DNA, but I tell people in my as we've been growing, I've been telling, it's great to have ideals and thoughts, but if someone doesn't own it and isn't responsible for making sure it gets put down the line, it doesn't always happen. So I think it's a great idea. Thank you so much. Erin Riley, Chief Social Impact Officer on Twilio, here with us on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
ServiceNow recently did a big update to their product line, and one of the things they announced was their Agent Client Collector, a new unified agent that gives teams the abilities to capture and monitor data, as well as meet vulnerability requirements across software, hardware, cloud infrastructure. The real important thing here is it's actually one agent that combines what used to be multiple agent functionalities into one. So it's simplified, less agents on our machine, and it's easier. I speak with Jeff Hausman, VP and GM of Operations Management at ServiceNow about it. Here's my interview with Jeff.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest this segment is Jeff Hausman of ServiceNow. Jeff is going to introduce himself as well as his position and background with ServiceNow. And we're going to talk about some news that ServiceNow released last week. I think it was on Thursday, and he'll tell us all about it. Hey, Jeff, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Alan, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's our pleasure. It's our pleasure to have you on. Looks like you're a bit of a musician back there, huh?
I dabble a little bit. The saxophone is mine. I will admit that, but the rest is other members of the family. But yes, we've got...
Oh, so you got a musical family. Keyboards, guitars, sax. It must have been a very interesting COVID time. You guys jamming away there, but good stuff. Jeff, we we're lucky, and we've had not a lot, but we've had a decent amount of ServiceNow people on over the last few months. From the, ServiceNow is a big company today. There's many different moving parts, and we've been lucky enough to have people from the DevOps and from the low-code, no-code. But why don't you give people a little bit of your background?
Absolutely, Alan. So I'm the GM of a couple of our businesses. We classify them into the operations management portfolio. This includes IT operations management. It includes IT asset management. It includes security operations and a number of other kind of related aspects to really helping people to transform the way they're doing things and drive more efficiency, drive more effectiveness and resilience to their organizations. A lot of what my teams do.
Fantastic. And of course, you're the GM for that. And look, it's been an incredible ride for ServiceNow, right? It's not just a digital transformation COVID thing. It's ServiceNow has been on this tear for it's got to be 4 or 5 years, maybe probably more, 7 years, 8 years even, where it's really become what it is today. But Jeff, you guys recently announced some news on Thursday, and if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to share with the audience.
Absolutely. So we introduced last Thursday something we call our Agent Client Collector. And this complements and is delivered in conjunction with, as the audience knows, ServiceNow's concept of a single platform. And we've now extended that with one agent to help continue to make workflow more seamlessly. First of all, for this particular capability for IT, but also more broadly for other parts of the organization. And the Agent Client Collector is really at the epicenter. What it is it's an opportunity to bring together and help people do a better job of monitoring, Alan, get better visibility into what's happening, and then using that for a variety of different types of outcomes that are going to help them run their business better.
Sounds good. And, look, my background is I've founded a number of companies, and I know the last thing the world needs is more agents, right? The last thing we want in IT is more agents. So the idea of being able to consolidate multiple functionalities into one agent versus running 3, 4, 5 agents, it's got to be a godsend, right? We, just to keep it simpler. Quite frankly, it's a lot. Of course.
I was just going to say, a number of our early customers, we have an early adopter program before we release things, and a number of our customers are very excited about the opportunity to bring together one common agent to provide visibility and monitoring, and also the ability to use scripting, if you will, and drive action that extends the ServiceNow platform in new ways, but doing it, making it easier for them to manage the sprawl that they oftentimes face.
Absolutely. But Jeff, again, my background, I remember, so I had founded a security company, and we were doing vulnerability scanning, host and remote, host-based vulnerability scanning, then something called network access control, right, where we were and we had different agents, and, consolidating the agents. So you had one Uber agent, no pun intended, one Uber agent that did all that. Customers loved the idea of it. Making that happen, on the other hand, was not an easy thing, right? So let me ask you, how'd you do it? How do you pull all of this functionality into just one, right, lightweight, easy to use agent?
Well, certainly a lot of thought and technical know-how goes into this, architecting it the right way, making sure that we are testing this appropriately and that we're able to design it and work with customers, because it's not just the technical how it comes together. To your point, Alan, we need to make sure this doesn't add excessive load onto servers or endpoints. You have to be able to understand and use the nuances of the output that somebody's trying to do. So for instance, this agent can unlock now, I need to do monitoring from my server infrastructure. You need to sense that information, bring it in, and correlate it with other sensing data that may be coming into the environment to help me make a better decision on troubleshooting and triaging a problem for resiliency. Or it could be that a customer you have a laptop in front of you, and you call the help desk because you're having a problem, a VPN problem. By using the agent, I can actually better with live view, what we call live view, getting real-time statistics and performance of what's running on your particular machine, I, as an agent, can help you to diagnose what's happening more quickly. And even if I need to, remediate more quickly by scripting back into your machine appropriately, maybe a configuration change to fix the problem. So you have to think through what are the outcomes you're trying to drive, and then design it so not only does it come together and not provide an overhead or a burden, if you will, on the teams running it, but the experience for the people that are using it is also going to be powerful.
Understood. I think another consideration is trying the best you can to future-proof it. Right? We live in such a dynamic environment, time today where things are changing. How do you you do the best you can, obviously, but give us an idea how, what kind of thoughts went into kind of future-proofing this?
Well, a number of things. Certainly, we think about this and how it relates to the rest of the ServiceNow platform, because the ServiceNow platform is a platform with a common data model and a common architecture. And by fitting the agent in, it's almost an extension of what we've already been doing. So we put in a lot of thought around how you can manage this agent, policy-based controls for the agent, the use cases, and going back to what I was saying before, that ability to really clarify how people should use it and give them the tools of how to understand how to use it. And then certainly we will continue to evolve. We have substantial engineering investment that will continue to evolve this and add things to the kind of the core foundational aspect. What we call the framework is central to everything we do. And then the parts, if you will, or the agent elements get bolted on top of that or sort of aligned to that, if that makes sense.
It certainly does. It certainly does. So, Jeff, in terms of rolling this out, is it like sort of a thing where you can, just push it out like that? Do customers have to proactively, go download and install it? What does it look like?
So the customers do have to roll this out to their environments, but this is packaged within our IT operations management portfolios. So somebody who has access to one of our capabilities, whether that is one of our bundled packages or one of our a la carte packages for health or visibility, is entitled, if you will, with our subscription units to use this, Alan. And then in terms of deploying it out there, we've made it easy to incorporate and leverage other types of tools for provisioning and deploying it and getting it out into their environment and a variety of different means and methods. And then we, again, like I said, give them centralized manageability of the configurations and how they're deploying it and where for a variety of use cases that we could get into.
Got it. So let's, and I'm respectful of your time, Jeff. Let's cut now to, we've outlined the agent, we've outlined, rolling it out and some of the concerns from ServiceNow's point of view and how it was designed and done. For our customers out there who are ServiceNow customers, right? For our readers, viewers who are ServiceNow customers, can you give us sort of maybe 2 or 3 the biggest pluses, reasons why they should do this like pronto?
Absolutely. I think one is just, you said it earlier, an easier way to get access and understand what's happening in your environment to support different types of workflows. And if you already have ServiceNow, it's such a natural, easy extension to add this on. For instance, many of our customers are looking for ways to drive better delivery of an experience to their internal employees, right? And those internal employees are often working with service desks, if you will, to address challenges. That ability to extend and no longer rely on necessarily other tools to complement what we have internally. So the ability for me to now be able to triage something specifically on an employee's machine, it's going to give them a better experience because I'm going to resolve it faster. Or if I'm looking to do monitoring, I'm looking to resiliency of my banking service or my e-commerce application, the ability to seamlessly tie in additional monitoring tools and the capabilities from the agent into what I have, it's going to help them consolidate and potentially reduce extra things that they have to manage in their environment. And our commitment as ServiceNow, to your point, we continue to invest in all the things that we do related to our technology, our architecture, our platform, our data models. This will be yet another extension that we continue to invest in to just make it easier for customers to consume. So while there is a deployment to it, the consumption is critical for us. Making it easy is probably one of the most paramount things that we're focused on right now, Alan.
Excellent. Jeff, we're almost out of time, but all right, so you convinced us. You had them hello. Where do they go get more information? How do they get started on downloading and utilizing this new agent?
So, Alan, we have a number of capabilities within the community. We've got a new blog that is out there that talks about the agent. We have from our product pages, we've actually given a number of different capabilities. The teams are enabled. So we've enabled our sales organization to answer questions, our customer outcomes team. We have an ecosystem of partners that are standing by and ready to help customers. So honestly, they should just be able to go through all the natural ways they ask questions about ServiceNow, and we'll set them up with whatever they need.
Fantastic. Hey, Jeff, thanks for coming on TechStrong TV and making us a little bit smart about this great new agent from the ServiceNow team. Keep up the great work. Maybe you could come back on and we'll take a deeper dive and see how the rollout is going.
Thanks, Alan. Great to be here with you, and would love to come back and share some follow-up in the future.
Love to have you on. Jeff Hausman from ServiceNow. Go check out the new combined agent here that, as Jeff has said, could make your life simpler and still give you some of that great ServiceNow functionality. This is Alan Schimmel on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back with our next guest. Next up, I'm happy to have my old friend Charles. Well, he's old in terms that I know him a long time. He's not necessarily old, but an old friend of mine, Charles Kalaji, who's been a security analyst for as long as I've been in security, almost probably 20 plus years. And Charles, of course, works with ASG. They have a new new report out with Cicd that really looks at the rise of the citizen developer. Low code, no code. And Charles is going to tell us about it. Here now is Charles Kalaji.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV interview. My guest for this segment is my friend Charles Kalaji. Charles, of course, is a longtime analyst covering the cybersecurity space. Working with our friends at the Accelerated Strategies Group, Mitch Ashley, Evelyn Orfield, and the rest. Charles, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's good to be here again.
Always a pleasure to have you on, Charles. I hear you guys had some snow. Was it Friday or over the weekend up in Boston?
Yes, we did. And it was like April 16th. It's just not supposed to happen on April 16th. I mean, we've had April 1st, but
April 16th is late in the year.
You can have some flurries, but this was 2-3 inches on the ground, so it was.
Yeah. Well, of course, you realize us folks here in Florida live for that, because then we call our friends and relatives up north and say, "So how's the weather?" But not to rub it in, it's a pleasure to have you on, Charles. Charles, you were recently part of some new research that ASG did you are the lead analyst on. Why don't you share with our audience a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Alan. And so interestingly, this research was not a cybersecurity research area, but it's technology, and there's a lot of interesting activities associated with it. And people do, they talk about security in this space, but this one was not specifically that. So it was talking about, we were doing some research on what's called low-code, no-code development. So the whole goal of that is to turn any person into a citizen developer. So it's kind of like, if you remember Ratatouille, the movie where they said anyone can cook. Well, this is kind of anyone can develop.
Yep.
So it's a hot area.
It's extremely hot. Charles, I will tell you, so the low-code, no-code space is something we've been covering over at MediaOps for the last 3 or 4 years. During COVID especially, and I think I understand the reasons why, it really has risen to the top of the food chain because, number one, we need to get things done even faster. Number two, we don't have enough developers. And number three, I think the state of the tools have progressed to the point where you're not just making like simple, Minecraft kind of looking applications, or to me it's like video game development moving from Pong to, some of the really graphically intense video games that we see today. I mean, the level of sophistication of the apps you can build in low-code, no-code has really become something.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we were looking at. We wanted to see how successful that's been and where some areas that it could improve or that it's hitting the target. So that was what we were looking at. We asked them specifically how the skills impacted their usage, how data connectivity, how data synchronization impacted the use of low code, no code. So as you say, it's big. 70% of the respondents said they're either using it strategically or that they're experimenting, kicking the tires, so to speak, on this. And so, yeah, it's being used. The
70%, wow.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there is some limitations, right? So no matter how good these tools have gotten, and they've added AI, and they do a lot of templates, and they continue to grow, there's still some areas that need improvement, which, I guess it can't really be, we can't really expect a citizen developer, or other people like to call them software assemblers. In reality, what the research kind of found out, I think, is that they're not so much citizen developers as software assemblers, because a developer needs to understand the intrinsic activities of an application. So you have to kind of understand how an application works, how it integrates or interacts with data and other aspects, and that's where it falls down, right? So if you're trying to integrate with applications data, synchronizing, replicating data, you have some issues, and the tools just can't connect to every application. They can't replicate every piece of data, and when that happens, you got to write code. So there needs to be some other components to this. It's not just, we can't just throw the guys into the deep end of the pool and expect them to swim, or in this case, code. You got to teach them a little about swimming before you throw them in. You got to teach them just the root. I think it's just the concept is that, you're just going to throw this guy. He needs an app, right? As you say, with COVID, the developer or somebody, marketing guy, he wants to add his contacts or to pull data of how successful a marketing campaign is, and be able to take that and put it into into his cell phone, and there's no one to build that. So that you use these low code, no codes to build that, and he can get to probably the basics of that, but pulling in some of that data and understanding it further out, that may be tough, and you got to give him a little more education on what development process means. So at least that's what I think the research showed.
Fair enough. Charles, we should mention this research was sponsored by I forget which company now.
CData.
Excuse me. CData. Okay. And because you always want to know that.
Yeah, and they're involved in doing the data replication and activity. So, it was kind of an important issue for them to investigate, and we were happy to do that, and and found some material. But the skills area was one, and then two, you do need, and they're related. You do need better data connectivity. But I think there's two parts of that. One, I mentioned that you have so many connectors, so many APIs, you can only add so much into the low code, no code tools. So, 17 to 20% of the people said they need another source. They need something else to help them get to that part. But over 50% said it is limiting the ability to use the data. So that's kind of an important aspect of it. But skills, the skills part was kind of more surprising for me in that these are designed to help that developers or create people. And it's not just, and it didn't turn out to just be the business guy, right? So interestingly, 47% of the low code, no code is being run by IT people, right? So they may not be coders per se, but they are in IT, but 90% had some type of limiting factor when they were developing their app. So it's not just the marketing guy I mentioned earlier who needs to build an app to connect information. It is technically savvy people that need to understand how an app. I don't think I could build that. I'm sure you remember, the drag and drop aspects of website development.
Sure.
Took a while to get developed, right? I I wrote it in HTML and now it's drag and drop. So
everything is WYSIWYG, as they say, right? What you see, what you get. And I held out. I used to doing straight HTML. When CSS came, it kind of stretched my limits as a developer. But today certainly WYSIWYG, even in WordPress with the Gutenberg interface and stuff, it is very much is like that. But I think there's a good point that you're hitting on here, and it's part of the CData thing, which is it's one thing to build, let's call it the front end of the app, right? I want to make an interface that does this, asks you for this input, shows you that. It's another thing to tie the back end of that app into data sources and, other parts of the stack and have it work, and pull in, because as much as we like to think we live in this API economy, there's just not an API for every single thing out there. And so I think a lot of times that's where people sort of run into it and got to know a little bit more in terms of that back end integration.
Yeah, that was definitely that came out of this. Like you say, that the developer, the marketing person, or whomever who wants an app, needs an app, the business guy, he knows what he wants, he knows what he needs, and he can get these tools can help him create that front end look and the data that but to get to the data, to go back into Salesforce or to go back into a Microsoft app or some other into a MySQL or some other database. Those apps have to have the APIs built in, and you have to get that related. And your your homegrown application may not be able to get that data without some type of custom work. So I guess what I'm just trying to say is that the organizations need to understand that they can't just push a button and they're going to get all the apps and all the data and all the connectivity. It's like any other development, right? You need to have a strategy. You need to lay out what you want, and you need to plan for it and have a development plan that you move to. It's not just, hey, we're just going to do all this stuff. You still have to do some strategic planning and some development and a little education.
Fantastic. Charles, this report will be available on the ASG website?
Yes, it will.
And that's accelst.com, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes.
Fantastic. Any other kind of big highlights from the report you want to bring out?
I think that's it. Let me just quickly get at a few of my data points here that I can point out. I guess the only other thing is it was kind of interesting that even though most of the low code, no code development is cloud, right? So it's a platform as a service sort of activity. What's kind of interesting is that 30% of the apps that will be created will live on premise. So they're not
really.
Yeah. So that was kind of an interesting. So when we asked about
that is
where the low code, no code applications that you create located, 30% were going to be a sort of on premise sort of environment. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah. The other areas I kind of mentioned, I just want to bring it up. I've mentioned that who's using these technologies, that IT was 47%, but the rest was a real good mixture of customer service, and you had your HR and finance groups, your support groups, sales and marketing, your product development, your line of business. They were all in the 25 to 30% of the people using. So there's overlap. You could have multiple, organization can have multiple users.
Yeah. No, I see.
It's a wide mix. So it is important, as we all it is important to our development. It's important to get these apps out. Some analysts say that 60% of all applications that businesses are going to use are going to be developed this way. And that's why I think this research is really interesting to say, okay, it's going to happen. We're going to do it. So prepare by making sure you give some guys, a little swimming lesson before you throw them in the pool. And then make sure that you understand the data connectivity that you're going to need, and that the tools that you select for low code, no code have those connectors. And if they don't, look for another source to get those data connectivity so that you can access the data you need and you can replicate it when you need it too.
Fantastic. All right, Charles, we're about out of time. Going to run to our next interview. Good work on this low code, no code report. Thanks for sharing a bit with us. Folks can go to the Accelerated Strategies Group, accelst.com website to download the report. Charles, we'll talk to you soon. Stay well up there in Boston. Stay warm. And we'll hopefully be able to see you at some point in person soon as we continue our new normal here. Okay?
So too. All right.
All right, Charles. Charles Kolodgy, Accelerated Strategies Group here on TechStrong TV. This is Alan. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, But who do you trust and not waste your time and money? Recruit Ops is the new way to source engineering talent. From Media Ops, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
Next up, as I promised earlier in the show, is part 1 of our next episode of The Haunted Hacker with Mike Jones. Mike's guest is Kim Kennedy, Enterprise Security Specialist. As usual, Mike does a great job. I hope you enjoy it. Here's The Haunted Hacker.
Welcome everybody to the Haunted Hacker podcast, episode 24, I believe. Time keeps moving. Tonight we have Kim Kennedy online with us live. Hi, Kim. How are you?
I'm doing well. Can you hear me? Okay.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks
for having me on.
Absolutely. We appreciate you being here. It's pretty laid back. We have a lot of fun, talk about world events and stuff and computer hacking and cybersecurity and all that good stuff. So let's go over a little bit of housekeeping before we get started and a quick shot at the news. Housekeeping, I'm going to go ahead and switch over the chat to where it'll only come to me during the session. So if you have questions, put it in the chat box. It'll come to me. We had a couple people record tonight because my connection is crap, it seems like, for the past couple weeks. So our last episode that we had, I was supposed to upload it to TechStrong TV, and it was only 20 minutes long because of a outage that put us offline. So hopefully having a couple people record will help soften that blow a little bit. So news, really the only thing that stands out today in the news was that the Fin7 threat actor, Fadir Halader, got arrested and is doing a 10-year prison sentence. He was part of the Fin7 group. So they're responsible for compromising thousands of credit cards, stealing a bunch of money, really prolific, but they were shut down, according to the news. Anyways, so let's get started. Like I said, it's really laid back. Feel free to ask questions to people in the chat during the conversation, and I'll make sure it gets to Kim. I believe Ryan is online with us as well. Ryan, are you still there? His video is not working very well. My audio is kind of lagging, so we'll have to play this by ear. Anyway, so Kim, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your journey through cybersecurity and your career.
So I'm actually relatively new to the cybersecurity field. I've been in kind of IT and more on a different side of things. I changed careers a few years ago. One of the reasons that kind of brought me into cyber, besides I tend to hang out with programmers, people in security, and just over the years, I've always been kind of a point person for smaller businesses. And then I went into an IT shop. I was actually in accounting. I ended up helping out and taking over their asset management and renewals and kind of streamlining that for them. And then I wanted more. And so I kind of switched over. I know that a lot of the topics today and a lot of podcasts tend to be around like, how do you break into cybersecurity? And it's a very interesting and hard thing to do if you don't have a military background and some other things. And even then, it's kind of interesting. And so over the years, my last job was at Attack IQ, and they've done an amazing thing by opening up an Attack IQ Academy that kind of helps give people kind of a better insight to some of these things on the more of the purple teaming, we're at a time where we kind of need everybody to know a little bit about everything. but you definitely have a niche for that. So currently I am looking for work, but I also am kind of starting some side projects that aren't cybersecurity related as well. I want to work for a place that I believe in. I believed in Attack IQ, and I have a love for them, and always will. But I'm on to the next chapter and kind of see where things lead.
And that's a good position to be in. Actually, I've spent a couple of years in that position, kind of floating around and doing some public speaking and stuff. So, what was your life like before you decided to make that turn into cybersecurity? I mean, what kind of things were you doing, like as career wise, or was it just fill me in about it. Tell me about it.
So I actually was doing accounting and HR. I started off with doing, back when I was 18, I realized I did not want to have a, minimum wage job for the rest of my life. I knew when I was 50, I did not want to stand on my feet. I think most of us kind of agree with that. And so I did whatever it took. I've had multiple jobs. I've worked pretty much every type of job I can think of. But with accounting, it's a wonderful thing, right? So it's easy in the fact of A plus B equals C. Yay. That's not real life in most jobs. The downside to that is I get bored very quickly. So usually, I'd go in and, figure out people's, business models. And the one thing that's great about accounting that is interesting is you can take that model and go to a different company. You need to learn it inside and out to really understand, hey, am I missing billing? Or is there any way we can be more efficient? Is there a better way to handle these things? And so with that being said, I used to get bored. So I am OSHA 30 certified. I used to work in construction a lot. I speak Spanish now. Wow. I inkjet press. I drive truck. I can drive it. I almost got my CDL, but I didn't. Just because I'm hey, I did all of that. Now what? So, and I've worked for that we did the accounting for 5 different factories, and so it's interesting because you get to learn so much about how things are run. Most people in accounting, I don't think, go to that extent. They just kind of we'll do an invoice here and there. And I'm no, I need to know it. And by doing so, that's why I've ended up with all these extra skills. So when my last job before I took the career change was at the MSP, where I worked for several years. Had they been able to take in a lower entry level, I would have been happy to have taken that, but they weren't at that spot. So I went on into their asset management, kind of, like I said, kind of helped with getting that streamlined a little bit better. I just love the people that I work with. When it comes to trying to get the general public and raise awareness, part of it is I'm a learner, but I love to teach. And so as part of what I do, before I switched over, I kind of started realizing that about myself. And so I wanted to get more visibility into the cybersecurity community. There's a huge need for people, although I don't think it's as big as we say it is. I think there just needs to be a potentially a different outlook of how we hire people in general.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I sound like a broken record when I talk about this, but when a company has a mid-level person and they move on, instead of going out to the internet and putting out a job requirement for a mid-level analyst, why don't these companies actually open up some true entry-level positions? Not entry-level that requires 5 years experience, but true entry-level. Those are very hard to come by. And I know that frustration. I can't count how many times I've been told either you're overqualified or most people just won't touch me at all. So at least you have that background where, you can walk into a business and apply and feel somewhat confident. I have to it feels awkward walking into a place and asking for a job because I'm waiting for them to pull up my rap sheet. So yeah, I mean, there's similarities there, right? So before I got into security, I've done a lot of stuff. I was in the military. I've been a professional boxer. I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. But I think that's helped in a way, because really cybersecurity is not like a blinders on type of career or environment. You have to be able to put on different hats and move to different positions and be able to, pick up where you left off or where that other person left off. And people who don't have the background that we have, like the various jobs and that big portfolio, it's hard for them to navigate from one position to the next within a company, like responsibility wise, because they've got blinders on. And that's what I tell people coming in the industry is, if you want to do defense, if you want to do cybersecurity, learn offense too. And I think that's part of the thing that we fail at as an industry is teaching people. So you hit a good point about becoming a teacher. I don't think I could ever be like a true teacher. I think I could probably do like video teachings or whatever, but no, teaching's not my thing.
No. I don't know if I'd be a true teacher in the sense of like 9 to 5, like at a high school, by no means. I'd be the teacher that'd be like, sit down, like, we'll figure this out, but I need you to at least pay attention. Like,
yeah, exactly. I just remember being a kid in class and what I did to the teachers. There's no way that I could endure that as an adult. There's just no way.
I also give those teachers a hell of a commencement, because I think they knew and saw those things in us that made us stand out, right? So one of my absolute worst teachers, and I say worst, but like hardest teachers, she was my English high school teacher. Everybody hated this woman. I did too. I would question her like, well, if you're telling me to do this, and if this is my opinion, you can't tell me it's wrong, like very stubborn. But she also was one of those people that made the biggest impact. I knew she had she really wanted us to understand so that we could get ahead. It wasn't, she was being mean. This is just what it is. She just wanted us to pay attention. And, I think she did recognize that, in me, and I'm sure your teachers in you, like, but again, yeah, do I want to do that? No.
No. And it requires everybody, right? So, when I look back at the teachers I had, my biggest thing was wanting to argue, wanting to debate, right? So if someone told me this was this, I want to know why this was that. Show me proof. Don't give me a theory, show me proof. And I think that's why I like cybersecurity so much, because I can find that proof. If I think there's a vulnerability, I can go out and find it. And it's that confirmation that I needed. Frenchie made a good point too. Cybersecurity is just like boxing, right? So you have to have the offensive, defensive strategy and all that good stuff. So what made you make the decision to go to cyber out of all of the industries? Why cybersecurity? And have you thought about maybe going into, maybe like supply chain auditing? Because that's going to be huge. What happened with SolarWinds was phenomenal for security auditors and supply chain auditors, because that opens up a whole nother career path for us. So what made your decision to go into cybersecurity?
So I guess the biggest thing for me is that, like I said, I had a lot of friends that were doing programming, and on the security side. One, I just think it's necessary. Working with a lot of small businesses, which I typically have worked with, small businesses or startups. I just saw that the lack of knowledge in the general public for a business, they're like, I'm not important, they're not going to hack me, kind of thing is so huge. And so actually when I worked at the MSP, David Levine, who was my boss, who's an amazing person. I mean, he was very upfront. Like, they were very on top of things. We have to do this because we're protecting all of these people that don't know or don't really have a huge chance. And so, like that educational part of getting that out was really, really important to me. I saw the need out there. I also saw how, even just talking with people on asset renewals, how little they understood, like, oh, well, if you don't pay this, like you lose your website. If you lose your website, you lose your clientele. You kind of just have to take baby steps. And I just saw this huge need. And I mean, just talking to, just general public, it just baffles my mind. As far as the auditing, I thought that originally I probably should have gone into a tax auditing background, because the thing that I love the most about accounting, and again, I kind of got into accounting after I just decided I'm not going to stand on my feet at a restaurant or whatever. Not that you can't make good money, but again, when I'm 50, not what I want to do. It's that learning and finding those gaps, right? So that's where I love, I kind of strive at finding those things in those feedback loops, but it also can be very frustrating when no one listens, right? So, I mean, as you know, as a pen tester, I've heard this over and over again. Pen testers go in year after year, and it's the same thing they said last year. And so it's just frustrating, because you're like, I'm trying to help you. How can I make this easier? So, yes, I think that's something that might be in my future. I'm still trying to figure out, there are so many options, but there's also, I don't believe in training or paying for something. I know you're a big guy on the certs. I don't need another if it doesn't absolutely apply. And yes, I do believe that being well-rounded is awesome. I'm still in those figuring out moments of how far I want, which path am I going in? How is it going to go with that? So, but I love, my big thing is I love being able to hunt something down and then say, okay, I found it. How do we fix this? And then how do we go forward so it doesn't happen again?
And that would fall right into place with threat hunting, right? I think that you would be fantastic at threat hunting. Some of the stuff the reason why I do what I do is because I like for someone to tell me that, oh, well, you can't hurt our network and you can't get into this, you can't get into that, because then I spend all my time getting into it. I think my last job, they touted that they had great, internal security. And then I ran a couple manual scans and there was tons of stuff that was wide open. So it's kind of a challenge, right? I like that challenge. I like someone to tell me that it can't be done. You did have some really great coworkers over at Attack IQ. They posted something about, I posted something about Cicd, and then two of the guys from Attack IQ, I guess ex-military, commented on it, and I was like, that's interesting. So yeah, I mean, we all have really diverse backgrounds. But what I think is the most important, right, is we have all these people that come into the podcast, right, into the Discord for the Haunted Hacker, and like I told you before, their ages from 11 years old till 60, right? I mean, just complete variety of people. But I think that's what's great about our industry is you can make a change into this industry. You can make a career change anytime you want. It's not something that, oh, well, I'm too old, too long in the tooth, can't do it. I've seen guys that walked out of the Air Force officers that sat behind a IDS screen as an analyst working underneath me at USGFCom. And they were, full brass. And it's amazing to see that the interest that the world has in cybersecurity now, especially after SolarWinds. But I was just thinking about that today, thinking about people, first getting into the industry and what would I have done post SolarWinds if I was getting into the industry now. And, working at one of the biggest financial institutions in the US, our supply chain was so massive. And to think about SolarWinds and to think about the fact that, how secure were they during SolarWinds? I hope that they don't have SolarWinds, because if they did, they probably got hit pretty hard. But I think that attack taught us a couple things, right? It taught us that no matter what happens in the geopolitical arena and the political tensions, hackers are still going to be hackers, whether the nation state or Exactly. Well, see, as a CT in the military doing RF and SIGINT, we had a saying, and the motto was trust no one and monitor everybody else. So, I mean, that's the mindset that we come from. But I think that the supply chain is important. I think that if anybody's getting into the industry, has asset management background, has some sort of handle on cybersecurity, and has the ones and zeros, they deal well with numbers, that supply chain really, that career path is going to be huge. I'm sure SolarWinds is probably kicking themselves right now. But anyways.
Well, and I think you kind of mentioned something earlier about, like the educational and like the well-roundedness, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I think that's one of the things a lot of people worldwide, we don't have it quite as much anymore for some reason. And I don't, we're talking about the blinders. It's like, this is my job. These are my job duties. And I've just never been a fan of that. I do believe that some people are better at a certain job, and I don't necessarily agree with the educational system as it stands in the United States. If someone is terrible at math, you don't yes, you need to make them understand math, but you don't need to punish them with math. Exactly. Some people will just be, whatever it is, right? Like they're going to kind of go down this, path, which is absolutely fine. But we end up now with people that are too nearsighted, right? So they can't see a little bit outside of their own picture. So they miss things. They only see how it affects themselves. And that's where I think accounting did really help with that, because I did have to know the whole picture to make sure we're not missing something, either on billing or making sure even a customer, hey, why is there, Azure cloud so low this month? If it was high, did somebody go in and do something? Is something not working properly? I mean, even to that extent. And I don't think a lot of people have that capability to kind of see outside of their immediate, like you said, like their blinder zone.
So it sounds like sort of like a forensics accounting type function when you're going through and looking at the Azure accounts and trying to figure out the differences and the deltas between what should be there and what's there. So would you consider yourself
right, absolutely,
blue, red, or purple? If you were to take a stance as a tester, what would you do?
I would none. I would say I actually do think threat hunting would be kind of I think I would really enjoy that side of things. I like you said, kind of being challenged, and then being able to I understand coding to a certain extent, right? I can see anomalies pretty easily over the course of things, but I'm not in any of those categories yet. Again, I'm very, very new, and it's very interesting. My role with Attack IQ was really more in the sales, but kind of more of information, just trying to get the name and be able to educate people, right? So I wanted, because what they are doing, there is a great need for it. I do really love the product. The people that I apply to, I'm looking at now, I mean, I look at their background. I want to, on all of my cover letters, and I want to believe in wherever I go. And I have this, and yes, it's idealistic and nothing's perfect. I get that. But at least if I believe in a product, I know that I can go in there with the right mindset. I mean, I'd rather be unemployed, and I hate to say that, but I'd rather be unemployed and working on my own thing than work in a product that I don't believe in. And, exactly. And nothing's perfect, but having that baseline of, not having blinders on, going into something, but believing in it, knowing that there's something out there, that there's an end goal that makes sense. I mean, there's some things that don't make sense, but it may sell. It doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter if the goal of the company doesn't kind of have any significant.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I can't speak right now. But balance between what I believe in and what they're doing.
Yeah, to me, it's really important to find a company that I believe in what they do. I can honestly tell you that probably about 90% of the companies that I worked for didn't have that attribute, right? So that's why they didn't last very long. But I did have one really cool mentor that worked at Verizon, and he's going to be on the show next month, Jim Mcconnell. And he was the one who built the GSOC, the global SOC for Verizon. Really great guy. And people like him and companies like, Verizon and some of the startups I've worked for, they're people. They're people, right? So Jim didn't look at me as, analyst. He looked at me as Mike Jones. And I think we've gotten away from a lot of that, to be honest with you, in the industry. I think that pandemic, with the different breaches that have occurred, we've lost track and lost touch of the human element of it. And it's become, so disparate. And part of it's the pandemic too. We all work remotely and kind of isolated. But I haven't seen a whole lot of companies making headway on making that a comfortable situation, making those people that work at home not feel like they work on an island. And that's kind of why we started this podcast, was just to kind of like get information out and give people that central area where they could go and learn and not feel pressure at work. And you have all the training materials you need and all that stuff. Because I think it's really important. And to get people heading down the right path in security, I think is important too, because there's nothing worse than seeing someone who's been in the industry for 20 something years. And when you talk to them and they wish they had gone into a different position after 20 years, to me, that's just bonkers. Like I couldn't imagine doing anything for 20 years that I didn't absolutely love. Like my track record with time spans is not very good. So, and this is one of those things, right? So the podcast I really enjoy and I'll be here till the end. But as far as the industry goes, right, let's look at the US cybersecurity industry as opposed to like the UK. Because I know from being over in the UK, some of the companies that I saw over there were fantastic. Like before I went over to the UK the very first time, people told me, the people in the UK are very cold. It's a very gloomy place. It's just not great. And I get over there and I thought, which UK were they talking about? Because this is fantastic. People were excited about cybersecurity and people were involved, and there was conferences everywhere. And I get back to the States and it's like, what I tell people in the UK is that the States is so oversaturated. The cybersecurity industry is so oversaturated with people who think they're subject matter experts, which you'll never hear me say I'm an SME. And then you have other people who just do it for a paycheck. There's no passion in it. So I don't know if you've encountered any of that, but I've definitely seen it since I've gotten back to the States. There's not a lot of passion as far as people's careers and industry go here.
Well, I think you're correct. I think in a lot of other countries, I see initiatives being taken on by the government with a lot more veracity than I do here in the United States. I do see with the United States, I do tend to see people that they're like, I'm doing this to get into it for the money. It's I can't get money. Well, but again, we also have this mentality, you graduate, college, you jump in, like these kids are getting out and they're like, I want $85,000 a year because that's just not life. And like somebody should have told them like you have to earn it. I changed careers. I'm at the bottom again. I'm not, I get it, but I arranged my life to make sure that was part of how I could progress without having to get out of what I'm doing now in order to progress forward. I knew I wasn't going to start off at 100K, but it's not about the money. Again, it's not about, it is and it's not, right? Like I want to be able to live a nice life. I want to be able to, but I want to, again, believe in what I do. And I don't think we have a lot of people that they're not taught that. They're like, we get out of college. How many people, and this is one thing that does drive me crazy about like the job search. How many people have a degree in what they originally had? Not many. And, but yet it's required to be in this particular field. And the thing is like, have a common sense test of like, this is what we do. Can you figure out this common sense stuff? But, yes, okay. I understand that college is wonderful for making sure that you can follow through in projects and different things. But again, I see that as our government isn't as proactive as I think it should be on a lot of levels when it comes to these things.
They're very proactive when it comes to prosecution and cyber law, but as far as like building programs and teaching the youth and getting cyber in all the primary schools, I think we failed
Big
that
one.
pretty hardcore. Yeah, big zero on that one.
I mean, if I could have someone do something it should be in grade school. I mean, toddlers are on tablets and iPhones, and it's insane, and yet it is not. Yes, I don't know why that's not a thing. Like, I can't get it. But again, I think our educational system in general, and I mean, even in other, like, it's not just US, I get that. I mean, but we just really need to have some people just really kind of get down to brass tacks and say, okay, this is starting at elementary school, at pre-K. How do we get this more? Like, we should have lessons in cybersecurity starting that young. It's one of those things that has kind of crazy.
It cracks me up because they'll dump money into different areas of the government, but then when it comes to cyber, I think they just put together an initiative within the past couple of weeks to bolster the infrastructure, right? To like harden the infrastructure because of SolarWinds. But here's the thing: is that if you would take that money and invest it in training and getting the right people in the right places, that breach probably would not have occurred. But the problem is that when you have people that are so spread thin and they're making that $60,000 a year, it's tough for them. Especially the U.S. mentality, the capitalist mentality of going out and being consumers is very difficult. One, for the pandemic, and two, if your company is paying you peanuts to carry out, the defense of their infrastructure, which I think is absurd. But anyways, I know it's
very mind-boggling.
It is. And the UK definitely has that program to help teach kids and gives them competitions. They have a thing called the Matrix Challenge, where basically it's a CTF. I haven't seen anything of that level put on by the government other than Hack the Pentagon. And to be honest with you, like, I've had friends who've been involved in Hack the Pentagon, and I had one that was actually threatened by the military because he had gone outside of scope and found like 1 million vulnerabilities. It was insane. But to me, that whole Hack the Pentagon thing is more of, hey, why don't you check our workforce, instead of, actually trying to, invigorate the community and get things moving and building things. It's more of a, hey, can you check and make sure that we don't have any vulnerabilities, because we don't want to pay an outside group to come in and do it. So they're getting something for free.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a lot of companies.
I think the mindset of companies is have a big sales team, have a big marketing team. And of course, you have to make money, but you have people that are in a field that not everyone wants to be in necessarily and can be in. And that's okay. But the people that want to be there, they can't get in because you have a huge corporation with 3 pen testers, and, but you spent millions of dollars on these tools that you're not using. So how do you break that mentality? How do we, and that's another one I know that's always talked about, is how do you get upper management to see the importance? I mentioned to you in the chat earlier, I'm starting on a side project for something in retail. And it's been kind of on my mind for a while, but with the current situation, it's perfect timing, right? Take every moment you have and make use of it. So, I don't understand, if I'm going to build this, I'm going to start off with the right security tools from the beginning, even if it's as small as a VPN and some encryption. I mean, to me, and I know it's not an easy answer, but to me, there's no reason you can't do something right from the beginning. But people tend to go, okay, we're going to just throw money at it, and we're not going to worry about that till it's a problem. We're not going to pay the fine until we get hit. Yep. But kind of going back to our government, and yes, we're good at, penalizing and catching people. But you said FIN7, they got 10 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're telling me somebody who is a heroin dealer or a murderer gets life, but these people affected how many people, stole their lives, took their money. This shouldn't, 10 years is a slap on the wrist for this. That's nothing. Like how this is not teaching, this is teaching people in what I see is that you get more trouble. And I'm not saying like go deal heroin by any means, but like if somebody's buying heroin, they're doing it because they want it, and somebody is selling it because there's a supply and demand, right? So again, obviously supply and demand on wanting users' credentials and their bank accounts but that person who's buying it wanted it. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that's kind of where it ends. Yes, it affects their family and whatever, but this is affecting 350 million people and they get 10 years. Yeah. So I just don't understand like the correlation between the punishment and so. Yeah, I mean the guy's going to lose 10 years, but what if somebody who lost their entire life savings? I mean, it doesn't just apply to cybersecurity. Like all these other people that have stolen people's monies.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
That was a great episode from Mike. For our Something Old today, we're going to go back into the archives from our recent Cybersecurity Summit and show you a session that featured my friend Chensi Wang, founder of Rain Capital, security luminary, and another friend of mine from the security world, Gadi Avron. Gadi is from the World Economic Forum, also very well-known security person, and they do a fireside chat that played up on our Something Old, on our recent Cybersecurity Summit, and they're going to talk about policy as code, how it impacts security, and what the current state of art is there. So here now is Chensi Wang and Gadi Avron.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Chensi Wang. Very happy to be talking to you today on a topic that I've been very passionate about recently. And I invited my friend Gadi Avron to join me on a chat today, fireside chat, although we don't have any fire. Gadi and I connected recently on this topic, which is the theme of discussion today, policy as code. And he and I are both looking at requirements from the user end, as well as some of the new solutions that's coming out on the market today that really addressing pieces of policy as code as a trend. So very excited to be having this discussion today. Gadi, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Thank you very much. So I'm Gadi. I'm a security guy. I've been in the industry now for probably 20, 25 years, something along those lines. And I've been involved with certs, and I've been a CISO. I've been working with the World Economic Forum. And honestly, I'm just here because I'm excited to be here with Chensi.
Thank you. I guess I should introduce my affiliation. I'm also a longtime security industry person. These days, I do security investments. I run a cybersecurity focused venture fund called Rain Capital, but previously I've done lots of operator work, research work, from academic research to industry research, all focused on security. So Gadi, you remember that I pinged you and say, hey, what is your view on policy as code? And you're like, interesting, because I've been looking at that as well. So great minds think alike. So the reason I got interested in policy as code is I look at what a difference infrastructure as code has made for DevOps and for sort of the speech market for production systems and applications. And the potential of policy as code applying to security, to me, is tremendous. So maybe I can lean on you to explain to our listeners what your view of policy as code is, and then I'll add my color, putting you on the spot right now.
Sure, I'm happy to be on the spot. Policy as code is exciting. I see it as the future. In a way, security is based on off of policy, but policy is for a very long time been about configuration or 300-page documents that nobody ever reads. And I feel that moving this to the realm of visibility and accountability and even enforcement, where you can actually follow things along and understand what you want to happen, whether it's on the configuration level or by gating things in runtime level, changes the game. There are many challenges that remain, but seeing how this works in the cloud makes me quite hopeful.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're absolutely right. Right. So security is run off policies. There's a long time lapse in those two endpoints, if you will. And that doesn't work today because the biggest thing I see in some of the modern companies' challenge for security are two things. One is speed. Second is scale. So if I don't have speed and I cannot deploy policy at a cloud scale, I'm already falling behind as a security person. I cannot catch up with the DevOps speed, which all the DevOps guys are basically laughing at the security team in the sense of, haha, you guys can't keep up. It's not a good feeling. So in order to solve the speed and scale problem, we have to move closer to programming. If we codify policies in a programming language that we can manage it at scale, we can deploy at scale, we can continuously monitor the violations, if any, and modify it dynamically as we would with, codified programs, then we have a much better chance of end-to-end control and also really moving security more towards the mindset of DevOps. And that's why I'm very excited about it. And you talked a little bit earlier about, some common misconception about policy as code is configuration as code. And I see slightly different. There's certainly a lot of configuration as code examples out there that people point to as policy as code, but there's also access policies, right? So if you think about policy as code, I think of the three categories: access policies, which you can codify; configuration policies, which you can also codify; and there's sort of general governance policies that don't neatly fall into access or configuration. So I would just stop there. Three categories. Do you see it differently? Do you have a sense of whether these three categories encapsulates the universe of policy or differently?
I think they do encapsulate it, but we can fine-tune if we like. For example, there is a difference between Active Directory and Windows alert type warnings and the policy around that, and having configuration files for a machine in the cloud or configuration files for some sort of control. We have seen a lot of policy engines within security controls over the years, but looking at this as something beyond just a specific control or a specific silo is what's exciting me right now on how that might be able to scale.
Yeah. So there are actually some examples of policies, in my view, doesn't neatly fit into access, configuration, governance. Of course, I don't want the governance to be the catch-all category, right? Everything go in there. So for instance, if we have a policy, it's pretty detailed policy, says every input variables have to have the boundary checked. What that is a security policy? No, it's an application security policy. Where would you put that? Which category would you put that in?
I actually would like to step away from the categories just for a second and try to look at the value for the organization. Okay. So the very basic level, we would love to manage our policies, know what policies are there, know if they are being used. And policy as code actually gives us an extra level of this where we can just output all the policies that are currently engaged and their activities, as well as enforce if we actually gate our policies through what we can essentially call an automatic decision-making engine. Right. So if we look to the value, that you can have value of, for example, I'm running this application and I want to make sure it's working according to my policy, right? And you can have a policy saying, if you would like to use authentication, you need to use to inherit the higher level policy from the organization around that. So it becomes a wider structure that is more generic around value, but it all goes into governance, if you like, even the application security part.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, it's all about governance. But the governance policies, what I had in mind are things that probably doesn't neatly say it's access policy or configuration policy. Some of the examples that you and I discussed, and I've seen companies deploy this today, are things like all S3 buckets must have or public-facing S3 buckets must have two-factor authentication enabled, for instance. That's a very straightforward policy people can relate to. And that is an access policy, but it's also governance. In order to have that kind of policies codified and deployed and also have the assurance that it is being enforced, we must have visibility, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the fundamental building blocks of what an organization needs to have in order to have policy as code as the state they want to get to. So in my view, some of the fundamental building blocks are, okay, we need to have a layer of programming language, right? So that cannot be bypassed. So we have, as an industry, we need to develop that or agree on that. And that could be OPA, could be something else. That's one. Second is we need to have a way of, once we have these programming language, there is a layer of how do you codify an object of which you apply the policy to. And those objects potentially are your assets. And a way to have visibility of the environment is another fundamental building block. And third is censoring and monitoring. So once I know where all my objects are, how do I know that they're operating correctly, they have the right enforcement mechanisms? So, these things are not easily done. So just want to get your thoughts on whether you have a view of what the fundamental building blocks are, you agree with what I just said.
Absolutely. So continuing from what we just said, we can, it's also, of course, governance, but we can expand the topics into, for example, education. You tried to create this machine, maybe you should try to create that more updated machine if this one is deprecated. And we can continue in building governance into many subcategories as we develop these concepts and bringing it to what you just asked. For me, that brings it to the components of what we're actually lacking. So when you look at OPA or any of the other possibilities out there, we encounter challenges in establishing a program around policy as code. One of them is how do we translate all of the current policies into actual policy as code? Sometimes starting from a silo around a specific need, like you just mentioned, would be a good idea. And we need to kind of break down the technology into two layers that are arbitrary. And one of them is the configuration as code, right? What does this configuration look like? What should it look like? Do I monitor for updates and all of that? And then the second layer is when we use a gateway, when we soft gate all of this traffic through an engine, such as you mentioned, for example, OPA, which is open source. And at that point in time, we can say, We don't allow that user agent, therefore we don't allow this particular traffic. Therefore, we make a decision that you can follow. And going from that, I try and look at an organization and say, I want to use policy as code and I want to get value out of it. And I want to be able to enforce. Challenge number one is I have too many policy engines out there. How do I communicate with all of them? And then continuing to challenge number two, how do I take all these silos and create some sort of generic control mechanisms or control plane around them? From the other side of this, writing the code. So in the case of OPA, that would be Rego code, which is similar to Prolog, which is very much a declarative language, very difficult to write. You need experts in the field, as in engineering as opposed to analysts. And that takes too long. So we need authoring capabilities.
Yeah.
And kind of trying to bring all of this together. On the one hand, how do we write the policies or translate the policies? How do we manage them centrally with the control plane? How do we make sure that we can communicate to various policy agents? How can we author much faster without needing engineers to do all the work? I think that essentially the industry has proven its usefulness around the cloud. And many people would call it policy as code. Well, it's, some people would define it more as infrastructure as code. And it's not finding its legs in the wider world, but it's still mostly used around authentication. So these are challenges I would like to see resolved as the industry matures further. And there are actually quite a few interesting companies out there. I will not mention personally, but I know you, for example, invested in one of them that help solve some of these difficulties.
Yeah, today we really want to talk about the concept and how the industry is moving in largely in that direction. Maybe some solutions are helping us, but not today. We're not about solutions. So you mentioned a concept that is very interesting, which is being declarative, right? The policies have to be declarative so that we can actually, when it gets to runtime, we know what it is and have a chance of actually deploying it in the right way. Certainly, we need to have declarative languages, which OPA is, but you pointed out that it's as a Prolog style language, it's very difficult. I still have nightmares of writing Prolog language code in grad school, and it's just not something that
you're just so cool. I'm not sure I feel comfortable with calling somebody writing in Prolog cool, but you are.
I only did a little bit. I can tell you I don't want to go back doing it. Anyway, but having the declarative nature of the policy is very important. But there's also others is the policy has to be open, right? The standard has to be open. You have your own proprietary policy language. I have my own. That's not going to work, right? And all the security solutions, different security solutions must have policies that are open standard based so we can actually talk to each other. So that's also a very important thing. And I don't think we're quite there yet, right?
Yeah, we haven't yet created a sort of, sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I think that, well, the vendors and the open source tools provide us with the opportunity to create something real and to push ourselves into this next phase in what policy can look like. We need the industry itself to mature alongside. We need to discuss amongst ourselves, how should a policy look like? Can we port policy from one system to another easy enough? Is there a certain standard for us to use? And I see some movement in that direction, but not enough.
Right. But if you think about how HashiCorp just came on the scene and really changed the game with Terraform, right? And really pushed the infrastructure as code field forward, is because they provided something that is so useful. And people just wanted to adopt it. And I'm looking at the security field, and I'm hoping there's this one or two things that people provide that is super useful, that's the security policy engine that people would start deploying, because waiting for the industry to consolidate on the standard takes a long time, right? Do you see that happening?
So there are two questions here. Do I see it happening? I see some working groups starting to work in that direction, but it's not anywhere close to being done. and therefore we are doomed to be siloed in the near future, perhaps. And that's okay to get started, right?
Right.
And then as far as usefulness, I think I saw a HashiCorp Sentinel video once, an introduction to policy as code. And one of the examples they gave over there was, you're trying to create a firewall rule, you must ensure that it doesn't do allow any, so that anybody can do whatever they want. And when you look in security, the equivalent I have in my head is all the orchestration tools that kind of connected all the APIs together. If we can have a similar type of approach, I'm not saying necessarily a tool, where we can take all these policies and automatically translate them for our use, I think that will be kind of the next step. So for now, I see policy as code as very useful, but still only for a few use cases, and security is kind of begging for it to come in and give the power of orchestration to what is now the world of policy.
Yeah, when you say orchestration, is really about the whole workflow that's surrounded in, I guess, deploying the policy, monitoring the policy compliance, and remediation if there's a violation, right?
Absolutely. It kind of gives the power of operations to the world of policy and engineering. You're monitoring things, you're watching for things, you have playbooks in place to respond accordingly. It's much more live, and I kind of like that. But at the same time, even disconnected from operations, being able to say, I have a challenge around that particular product, solution, architecture, whatever it is, and I would like to apply some policy, some filtering, some monitoring, and I don't have the capability to do that. With policy as code, you can very simply, again, it's not a simple process to create these rules, but you can relatively simply create your controls where you don't have them now, and then have visibility and enforce them, which I like.
Right. So going back to what I just a few minutes ago, we talked about, the policies have to be declarative. They have to be open. The different policy engines can talk to each other. And you just touched on a few other very important characteristics. Is they have to be testable, right? So it has to be.
Actually, I would push back and say I did not say that. You just added it in, and it's the most important thing possible. Yeah. I don't know how I didn't bring it up, but honestly, that is the biggest challenge, and I would love to have more testability. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So testability. And I think another thing that policy as code brings, which is also very important for security, is now we can have a very explicit exception conditions, right? So, because all the policies need exceptions. And once you have a codified, then you can say, what are the exceptions conditions to this policy? And then we can actually document and monitoring it. So we are at 20 minutes, and I have one last thing I want to discuss with you, which is, to me, is very exciting, but it's very, very early stage within the realm of policy as code, which is a lot of the policy as code examples I've seen are all in production environment, right? So some of the things you can test configuration, config as code, or even access authentication as code, and then monitor to see if your workloads in the cloud conform to that policy. But when it doesn't conform, when you have a violation, or you say, hey, I've discovered this new thing, we really need to make an update on the policy, that's when the policy as code current state of art kind of falls down, which is, okay, I've determined there should be a change in the state. Now I sort of have to go through ad hoc process to go back to whatever the policy author is to change the policy or change the code or change the application. There's very little integration, if you will, today back to early stream into the development process. And that to me is also a critical step, although I think we are far further away from that today as an industry. What do you think of that?
I think that the CI/CD pipeline has brought a lot of opportunity to security, allowing us to actually innovate in application security in a way we couldn't before. And I like that people are dreaming and building in that space. I don't think we're there yet. But with that, I keep trying to imagine all of these security controls, whether it's in the developer IDE or later on in the chain, where you can actually add policy as code verification. So let's assume, for example, somebody has a basic authentication mechanism. And that authentication mechanism is directly wired into the policy as code engine. If something happens there that shouldn't, there would be a live alert and there will be communication with the developer. And I think that kind of communication and that kind of closer monitoring and remediation capabilities are mind-boggling when one day they will happen. Maybe it will be unfeasible, but I think it might be.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of two minds on this. Certainly as a developer, I don't want all kinds of alerts to flying at me, right? And I would just turn them off. But at the same time, there's tremendous value in tying real-time visibility and insight back to upstream in the development lifecycle. So we'll have to carefully manage that, I think. So we're almost at time, Gadi. One last parting thought that I want us to discuss is, if an organization wants to start with policy code, where do you think they should do today? Which direction they should look at to start policy as code initiative?
I would say they should start internally. I'm pretty sure there are people, depending on the size of the organization, I'm pretty sure there are people who already have plans to use policy as code and trying to figure out what the use cases are and what people are trying to do around that. I would probably start them in the right direction. But of course, large organizations also need to consider the wider policy. How do you use it? How do you manage it at scale so you don't create silos? I would say if you're interested in doing this, probably get one of your engineers to start studying the open source tool like OPA, right? And try to see how that works, why it would work. Try to figure out a use case or two, because you don't need to do a complete integration of all your policies into policy as code, which honestly is sort of close to impossible at the moment. Start using it, see how wonderful it is, or go to your cloud people and see what they are doing right now, because infrastructure as code has proven itself.
I would say I would go to, very similar to what you said, I would go to the cloud operations team and also the cloud security team and figuring out what are the most commonly used policies today in my cloud environment. And then take some resources to say, hey, can I codify this set of policies, or maybe just take one or two in OPA? And if I were to do that, how do I manage the end-to-end authoring, deployment, and monitoring lifecycle for this particular policy in my environment? And then you really take through the exercise and thinking through how the deployment execution would work. So that would be how I would do it. And I think it's very exciting. I'm looking at, if you're listening and if your organization is going through this exercise, I'd love to talk to you and understand which policies, which set of policies you're looking at, and what are the challenges and how you're working through all that. So with that, thank you so much, Gadi. It's always fun talking to you, and thank you for jumping on. I know it's late in the day for you. I love the airbender toy, Appa.
Appa is my spirit animal. Appa is my spirit animal.
I love Appa. It's
you know what? I will actually steal a minute here and ask you, as a smart investor in this field, as I see you anyway, right? Do you think that any policy as code solution would be able to sell without a pew-pew map? When you see the world, with all the lasers going back and forth about policy violations so that we can display to management, kind of like the Norse map of old. I think a pew-pew map is a must for us to be able to buy and sell any security product.
I don't think so, but because
really?
Well, what I think is you need to tell people what's going on without getting into the nitty-gritty details, right? If I'm seeing all the microservices alerts going on, this API endpoints, that API endpoints, as a security engineer, I'm going to be like, I'm getting a sensor overload. Don't you agree?
And that's why I like you.
Okay. I like you too. And that's why we have such a great time discussing security issues such as policies code. And if you were to look at policies code, listen to this session and send me a note or send Gadi a note, find us on LinkedIn. We'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com is an article that looks at some DevOps trends to watch in 2021. Now, it's hard to believe we are a full quarter of the way through the year, but there's still plenty of time to learn about some of the trends that are on the horizon and could make a presence over the next 8 or so months. This article offers up 5 that organizations need to consider, and most of them aren't about technologies or tools, but rather people and ways of working. It's a different take on the usual trend story and offers some insight that might be helpful as organizations embrace or move deeper into DevOps. It's an interesting read, too. And we have an article that explores how the DevOps skill journey fosters a learning culture. Human skills, among others, have always been important, now more than ever. Thanks to the pandemic and the increase in remote work, empathy, diversity, creativity, and personal commitment have been put to the test. Needless to say, we've been challenged over the last year. And that's being borne out in the recently released Upskilling 2021 Enterprise DevOps Skills Report. 69% of respondents consider human skills a must-have or a very important skill for the DevOps humans. Yet only 39% of respondents reported they have a formal upskilling program. It's widely recognized that to continue thriving within DevOps or to initiate a DevOps journey, individuals, leaders, and organizations should take action in developing skills across these areas. So why the disconnect? This article takes a deep dive into the human aspects of DevOps and the skills necessary to not just survive, but thrive. It also takes a look at the skill journey toward becoming a learning organization. This is a very insightful article, chock full of useful information for any organization looking to up its DevOps game, not only in technology, but also in people and process. All right, over on Container Journal, Mark Hornbeek offers up a containers practice. Analyses provide valuable inputs for formulating a strategy and roadmap to improve a topic, and containers is certainly no exception. There are 7 steps in Mark's 9 Pillars Gap Assessment tool designed to provide a comprehensive analysis of how an organization is currently using containers and how it can improve its practices regarding them. In this article, Mark walks us through each step and offers some useful commentary on how a gap assessment tool can benefit organizations. In short, a gap assessment tool can help identify gaps and guide organizations on how to close them. And that is never a bad thing. And we have an article that looks at a maturity model for cloud-native databases. Companies have been leveraging Kubernetes and other technologies to move workloads to the clouds, but there have been some challenges. What to do with the data layer, what technology should they use, where should the organization keep data, and how should they move it? At the center of these questions is the database. Many of the databases that support our applications have been around for a long time, well before the notion of cloud native took hold. What then does a modern cloud native data architecture really look like? This article takes a look at the maturity model for cloud-native databases to assess data layer technology as part of an overall cloud architecture and to ensure that a consistent level of maturity is applied across the stack. And over on Security Boulevard, we have an article that looks at the 3 keys to defending Active Directory. While perimeter defenses such as firewalls and antivirus software remain essential elements of a comprehensive network defense strategy, stopping 100% of attacks at the perimeter is impossible, thanks to an ever-evolving attack surface. Eventually, an attacker will successfully breach those defenses, establish a beachhead within the network, and move laterally to escalate their privileges, identify valuable assets, and then disrupt network operations. And one of their main areas of disruption is Microsoft Active Directory. Compromising Active Directory can hand attackers the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, so it needs to be secured and well. Fortunately, organizations can dramatically increase the security of Active Directory by improving security in 3 key areas. This article looks at what those 3 areas are and offers some tips for securing Active Directory fully. Finally, we take a different look at the recent Microsoft Exchange Server and SolarWinds attack with an article that suggests companies need to rethink their security strategy. It's not so much about the tools, but the approach many organizations take with cybersecurity. Microsoft Exchange is such a high-value target because it has almost 80% enterprise market share, and as such holds the biggest secrets of our times. Yet, with this most recent breach, nobody knows where those secrets went. This article analyzes the vulnerabilities in Exchange Server that hackers were able to exploit and notes that some of them can be mitigated with proper reviews, penetration tests, and tools such as web application firewalls. Others, not so much. That's why a different approach to security is needed, one that utilizes both behavior analysis and cryptographic authentication. Perhaps if Exchange Server had this kind of protection, the intrusion attempt would have been identified and stopped before it caused any damage. Now, however, we may never know. All right, that's it for the headlines for today. Please check back with me tomorrow when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Jack Ham, who is the CISO and VP of Infrastructure at Gigamon. Jack, thanks so much for joining me today. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
I am super excited to have a conversation with you as a CISO about being a CISO. It's something that we actually don't have a lot of conversations about, but we do try to approach security from all angles and all perspectives, and we do have a pretty healthy community of CISOs that read Security Boulevard and are kind of part of the TechStrong TV audience. So it would be great to kind of hear your perspective as a CISO on what you've seen in the industry and what your years as a CISO has kind of taught you as perhaps maybe giving us a little bit of schooling, if you will, or education about what it means to be a CISO and maybe how that job role has changed over the last couple of years. So why don't we dive in with how you kind of got to be the CISO at Gigamon?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think like a lot of people, I got a battlefield promotion. I had been with Gigamon for several years at the time, and then the then CISO left to head elsewhere, and wound up falling to me to pick up the mantle and go forward with it. This is my first seat in the time in the seat, and it's it's been quite a learning experience. I think one of my big things that I've noticed is that when you're a little further down the org, there's a sort of a lack of upward empathy towards what's going on at the CISO level. And finding myself in that position suddenly made me realize that there was quite a lot to learn there, and a lot of changes that, especially coming from a technical background, I wasn't necessarily always ready for them, but I was motivated, and so I ran into it anyway. We figured it out.
So it was kind of like on the job learning. So, but yeah, I mean, walk a mile in my shoes, right? That's the no true words were ever spoken, especially at the C-suite. So, yeah, it's not all about the executive dining room anymore. So,
that's right.
So, what's changed then? You've been in the CISO position for what, 2 years now?
Years now, yeah.
So you've had 1 year of kind of normal life and then 1 year of pandemic CISOing. So
well, and in addition to that, about 10 days prior to the stay-at-home orders coming out in California, I also picked up a chunk of the IT department. So in addition to securing the IT, I was delivering the IT.
So not much going on with you, right?
No, nice easy time. The the shift to work from home, everyone suffered it a different way, but some people a little less than others. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges in watching it, my own org was sort of this realization that we had built around an office-centered culture, and that was how we were managing risk. And then suddenly everyone packed up and went home, and you realize that some of your controls don't make sense anymore, or you're not aligned to sort of drive down the risk the way you need to. And on top of that, you've got all your peer VPs. Everyone's doing their absolute best, and they've got other considerations also. And so it's really hard at that time to sort of go back and say, hey, we need to reevaluate control frameworks and how we do risk management. And so those things, I just hear them repeated over and over talking to other CISOs. I've had people say we were really far forward ahead, so we virtually saw nothing through. Somebody told me that they had no choice but to take every single one of their enterprise apps and just jam them out on the internet and hope for the best, because they were entirely on-prem and didn't even have VPNs. So I think the problem is everyone's experience has been different in the sort of the technical nuance of it. But I think the one thing that sort of remains true across the board is that no one really, I don't think anyone really was ready for the risk. I sort of joke that the BCP is always, pretty much everyone has pandemic in their BCP, and it's almost always listed as a low likelihood event. And so the problem with low likelihood events is when they happen, they're not low likelihood anymore. So
right. We're just waiting for the alien invasion now, right? Because we've gotten the pandemic. So
it's made me look at meteor strike a little bit more cautiously now.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Well, but to your point, people tend to think about things that, are easy for them to kind of wrap their heads around. So I guess from there, it's pretty easy to develop a security plan or a business continuity plan to mitigate those risks. But how do you plan for the risks that nobody is really wrapping their head around, like a pandemic? I mean, has this kind of changed the way you guys approach security and how you approach security from a disaster recovery or a business continuity plan point of view? How's that changed?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I think sort of really came out of this is that, at least for me, and I've been talking to a lot of people about this, but I think the notion of the sort of the list, the types of things and the probabilities, that is sort of, I don't see the value as much in that anymore, is sort of understanding the implications of what happens. And what I mean by that is that if the office is unavailable because of a pandemic or an earthquake, the function is the same. The office is unavailable. And to start to think about this a little bit, rather than trying to sort of divine the future, think about this a little bit more around the context of what are the impacts we're actually looking at. Because I think one of the, even in our own BCP plan, sort of after we dusted it off, I was like, wow, this thing is not, this isn't really that effective of a plan. And I hear this story over and over again. And I think part of it is because there's the natural battle between compliance and security, and they're not the same thing. And so if you need the 90-page BCP because of compliance reasons, it's almost to me at this point that you should have the actual BCP and the actual DR plan you intend to really use. I I like looking at other industries and see how they handle sort of crisis. And one of the ones that has always stuck out to me is the aviation industry, in the sense that they're moving really fast. They're the ultimate in agile, going 560 miles an hour. And if they have a problem in a plane, they need to get the plane under control. And have you ever looked at a flight checklist for like a 747 or a Boeing plane or something? But there'll be an emergency, fire. And the first thing will be keep flying the plane. and then from there, it's a series of sort of like, what are the steps you take in order? It's sort of a micro business continuity plan for every plane. And I think there's a key takeaway for me is that there's a real strong urgency to build towards that, because the other type of BCP is effectively trying to control the situation. And we can't control situations. If there's anything we learned out of this is I hope everyone realized after COVID hit that we don't really have any control over the universe. It does its own thing.
That's true. That's very, very true. And I don't think that, anybody realized that it was going to go on as long as it did. It's like, I think everybody thought 6 weeks and then we'll all be back in the office. But so I think that when so many organizations said, they just sent their employees home, I don't think that they were really thinking about the long-term implications of doing that. So I wonder, is that something now that also kind of has to be a part of that thinking is, we can't think that this is only going to be a temporary situation because we have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if the news is accurate, vaccination rates are up, people will start going back. But I think there's sort of a double-edged sword. There's the can you go back, and then the question of do you want to go back? And I think a lot of companies have also sort of realized that the hybrid work model is actually functional. And in some cases, I think people, I live in the Bay Area right now, and 3-hour commutes and stuff like that. It turns out they take a lot out of the workforce. And so I think there's probably an imperative to stay out. I think from the sort of the technical standpoint, it really does sort of push forward the notion of, be it cloud forward or at least, the ability to do security in sort of a very dispersed, network design and things that will all sort of, I think, be a natural move forward. If I sort of just think of like talking to other people or seeing what other security practitioners are posting and stuff, it seems like there's a real, the people who were most ready were the people who didn't have legacy concepts. They were already, everything was already identity based. Everything was, SaaS services or in the cloud, and they all had a much easier time. So I do think this is sort of, it'll still take forever because, as everyone knows, legacy systems take forever to get rid of, but people are still running mainframes. But I do think that this is might be the meteor that kills the dinosaurs of legacy systems over the next few years. So.
Yeah, well, I would disagree with you on that. If at least part of that, I think that we're always going to have certain systems that will be, those systems of record are always going to kind of be around. I know that there's a push now for, I think Amazon, AWS actually has come out with a new kind of mainframe in the cloud offering or something like that. But
ball up there.
Yeah, exactly. But I honestly think that we'll always have some sort of legacy on-prem infrastructure hanging around. If nothing else, to kind of guarantee that, when that meteor hits, there'll at least be one machine that still works.
No, that's actually a fair counter to it. It's a good point. The other thing too is, we touched briefly on the compliance side of it. And the reality is there's just some industries are they're not going to get out of that power grid things, the very highly regulated defense stuff. That's true. That stuff's not going to go for the sort of the standard enterprise. I think though, that you'll see the move, although you bring up a really good point there though, which is that and it goes back to that disaster and sort of continuity planning standpoint is that, the companies that do go very forward and were able to handle a pandemic, it's an interesting point. What does that ability to survive that not cover them in? Because then somewhere else, the unknown unknown of what's the disaster that does take that out. So
yeah, I got 2 words for you: power grid. If everybody gets knocked off, then.
I used to work for an advanced metering infrastructure company that did the power grid stuff, and that's a scary. Power grid's an interesting one.
so anybody's got a really good idea for that, please let me know. And generators, I don't think is an appropriate answer. So anyway, Jack, so many ways we could take this conversation, but I do want to kind of find out if kind of the your security posture at Gigamon. Do you think that this is that it's changed kind of over the last year or so in the way the company kind of approaches security and your business continuity planning? I mean, are you guys bringing in more elements of the organization and more people from different departments to really take part? Because obviously it's not a one size fits all approach.
So we had already had great cross-functional collaboration on this, and as a matter of fact, I credit that has more to do with how successful we were than anything specific that I or my team did. Everybody was ready to go. There was no pushback. Sort of the way the first week or two played out, is sort of really it's an incident response at that point. People deferred to our expertise to get things moving, and then as soon as we were able to, we sort of went right back into normal operations. I mean, we were functionally normal operating within 2-3 weeks, and that I think goes a big to you sort of touched on at the beginning about the what is the role take? Well, I think one of the places that I really spent a lot of time, and I'm glad I did, because my mentors told me to do it, was that relationship building. Mm-hmm. Because in the moment of crisis is not the time you want to be introducing yourself to somebody you need to change their work behavior or provide you with loaner resources or something. So I think the strength of relationship building early on is critical, because the risk of not doing it is effectively that you show up in crisis and now you're in this situation. So sort of from how we reacted, it went really well. In terms of how it changed, investment in some different controls. We definitely changed some of how we approach things. Remote access obviously is a really big situation. We amongst other things build network hardware. So we have a lot of physical data center needs where we do testing and stuff. So we had to do some sort of quick re-architecture on those things. But for the most part, everybody just came together and sort of recognized the call of the day, and so it went fine. And I actually, quite hearteningly, I hear that from most people. Like I've seen 1 or 2 people maybe on LinkedIn posting something that sounded a bit like things didn't go so well from that standpoint. But I think, humans, if nothing else, we sort of rise to the challenge when there's crises that are foisted upon all of us at once. So
that collective intelligence kicks in, and that's always a benefit to any organization that can really tap into that. What about kind of making your business continuity plan a living document? I mean, were you guys kind of tweaking it as you were going along and saying, well, maybe that didn't work, and so kind of creating, the perfect document, if you will, for the next time.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because I joke that all the tabletoping you do every year, this was the best tabletop exercise ever.
Oh, yeah.
We really got to see what worked and didn't work. Yeah, we we went and like I said, we actually turned it on its head and decided to stop the nonsense of trying to categorize the probabilities of events, and instead pivoted over to the probabilities and impacts only on the actual occurrence. And so one of the very first things we did was sort of go through and start rewriting the thing top down from that viewpoint, because we realized there was just a lot of extra mental expenditure to worry about the earthquake, because so our headquarters is in Santa Clara. There's going to be an earthquake someday.
Sure.
So rather than try to divine when the earthquake's going to happen, let's think about what the impact of the earthquake is. And so from that, we made a much slimmer document. And the other thing we did is, and this was I was really proud of my team for coming up with is we managed to distill down sort of like the immediate reaction to, a one pager that we could circulate to everybody and say, hey, in the future, it doesn't matter what it is. Don't worry. Just like, here's what you're going to do first. And again, it goes back sort of to that modeling that we had looked at other industries about, like I said, aviation, nuclear power, things like that, where they don't have the luxury of time. And I think at the beginning of a crisis like this, one of the biggest things is sort of, is somebody recognized as the person that's going to just orchestrate everyone else for a little while until things get back to normal. And so we basically have turned the BCP and the DR process into that document, because it shouldn't also be hinged on a specific person. It should be anybody should be able, whoever's there should be able to pick it up and do the job. So that's been a lot of where we pivoted to now.
That's great. That's great. Boy, there's a lot of great takeaways in this conversation. I hope people listen to this over and over and over again, because I just keep thinking about the ways that traditional disaster recovery business continuity plans are created. And to your point, they're created once they sit on a shelf for years and years and years until it's time to implement them, and then people pick it up and it's completely useless to them. So
you're not trained in it, and they don't remember what it gets. The problem. Everyone's got to, even think about it from the perspective of an InfoSec team, like BCP, DR, that's a small slice of the entire function of security. And so the problem is we have a short working memory. And so this was sort of the theory of my team, was that it has to be something where they can look at it and it jogs enough of the key points that we review, that we've gone over in the bigger document, to get it moving again. Because otherwise, to your point, you pull open a giant document and people are just they sort of become incapacitated based on they're just overwhelmed immediately, because they're like, oh, what section do I go to? And it's and so I think that's sort of the big thing, is that is what is the part that you can commit to the working memory, and that you can get in a way that regardless, is the person a security person, is it the VP of marketing, whoever, and it should be something that everybody can sort of follow and understand. And it goes back to the sort of the need that security isn't something the security organization does. Security is something the entire business does. And so when the BCP is built for the security org, I think that's what generates those sort of, giant monolithic documents. And so we sort of looked at it the other way and said, well, isn't BCP really just an awareness function for the whole business? And if you flip it around on its head, it can't then be a security document. It has to be a document. It has to be a business document that anybody can. So that was sort of and that was my team's idea, and it was a great idea. So
yeah, I agree. And it is, it's definitely a much more valuable document when you approach it from that perspective. So do you think that your job is actually going to get easier now that you guys have, maybe weathered the worst of the pandemic, and, organizations?
No,
or is it just going to be a different kind of hell?
It'll just be a different. Well, it's funny. Like I went through that phase where it was where it was like, wow, what did I sign up for? But over time, I realized that it's going to be different every day. The fundamentals are there, though, and I think as long as you always sort of revert back to the fundamentals and stop and think about what you're doing, and we're doing the CIA triad, or add the R if you want resiliency on the end, whatever you want to do with it. But if you sort of always go back to why are we doing what we're doing, I think then all those things just sort of, it's just a new type of a problem, and then it doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. And then a pandemic just sort of it sort of sloughs off as it's just another thing that happened.
I hope we never really think about the pandemic as just another thing that happened. But yes, I totally understand what you're saying. It's you just think about the normalization factor, though, just like how quickly it became normal. And it's sort of like that actually, in the sort of my broader sense of security, is that's the part that stresses me out a little bit, because of the fact that, we see breach after breach after breach. And then,
And then when the pandemic happened, it made me realize it's not that breaches are unique, it's that humans are really adaptable. And so there was this sort of spike of like catastrophe. And then pretty quickly we were back, even under lockdown, people were sort of immediately, I mean, just think of how quickly people got into the use, being at home, working on Zooms. And so the one part that it does worry me in security is that that breaches are sort of the reason we haven't had better responses and better regulatory control on it and stuff is because like we've already normalized them, and they're normalized to the point now where people just sort of are like, oh, it's a breach. Okay, let's move on. So.
Right. Well, I guess, you either have to normalize it or you go crazy thinking about it. So, I guess that's the way humans adapt to these situations. So, but anyway, Jack, thank you so much for having the conversation with me. I want to have more conversations with you because I think you have some great insights as a CISO, and we can talk about all kinds of stuff. And but thanks so much for kind of walking me through how you guys kind of got through the last year, Gigamon, and how you've changed your business continuity planning to kind of be more less reactive to certain events and more as a guide to moving forward. So great stuff. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community: digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with Bert Kashyap, who is the co-founder and CEO of a company called SecureW2. Bert, thanks so much for taking the time and talking with me today. Really do appreciate it.
Appreciate you having me.
Tell me a little bit about SecureW2.
We are a cybersecurity company that has been around actually for a while. We started off as an open source project. And right around 2015, we decided to really focus a lot on bringing zero trust principles and digital certificates to the marketplace. And we saw that the technologies were out there, but we felt like there needs to be enablement to really bring that technology to the mass audience. And that's what we've been focused on the last couple of years.
All right, great. So I imagine over the last 12 months or so, as so many of your customers have kind of shifted their workforces to remote work, you guys have seen some changes in the way organizations have kind of gone about, with their cybersecurity efforts and just kind of their cybersecurity mindset. So now that we've hopefully kind of turned the corner, hopefully, and organizations are starting to open up. You guys are now in discussions with organizations and probably CISOs in particular to help them determine how coming back to the office or having their employees come back to the office is going to impact their security. And so tell me a little bit about what you guys, these conversations that you are having, what are folks concerned about, and what are some of the things that that you're hearing from your customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that is what we hear overall across the board, across most of the organizations that we service, is that organizations are having a tough time figuring out whether employees are using their personal assets and other digital assets to access their corporate data. And with more and more things going towards the way of SaaS and all the applications are in the cloud, it's just as easy to access those apps from your daughter's iPad or laptop as it is from your corporate device. And from a convenience standpoint, there's a lot of folks that are, sort of not using their corporate sanctioned devices to access this data. And so one of the key things that organizations are thinking about as they're coming back into the office, they've had some amount of technologies that are in place to do some detection of things like rogue IoT devices, and there's lots of great technologies that have been in place. But now it's really those technologies are, even if you have them, but they are expensive. But even if you have them, they're only 40% effective, maybe 60% effective, because they're there only 2-3 days a week, with this hybrid model or less, or generally what we're hearing from most of our customers is the vast majority of their employees are not going back to 5 days a week. So what do you do about that? And how do you create trust with who's accessing your data with the right type of devices? And that's a key critical challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine. And, so many organizations really did sacrifice security for convenience at the start of the pandemic. And I'm not sure how many of them kind of pivoted back to, all right, now we really need to make cybersecurity a focus because, disruption. And so, I wonder what the long-term effect is going to be as they do return to the office. How many of these organizations are, going to regret that, that decision to really not focus so much on cybersecurity from the get-go?
Yeah, I think this is a key challenge that they're going to have to face, strategically long-term, because this is here to stay. We feel most organizations are telling us their employees are really liking the sort of mixed hybrid work environments. And even us as an organization, we've found through our employee surveys, it's been really beneficial to some of our team members. So what I see, sort of in the future is, organizations are going to have to take on a lot of zero trust principles and have to take on the fact that, what they have to do with their devices, used at home and on the corporate environments, what's allowed and what's not allowed, and enforce that not just on the corporate enterprise, but really going to have to take on some level of security in the work from home environment. We do a lot of work, for instance, in Wi-Fi security, and we know that very important corporate executives are running their systems on very insecure Wi-Fi networks, for instance. And how long is IT going to sort of ignore that and face the music long term? And so they're having to face that head on. We saw a recent investment from Fortinet in Linksys, which is telling me that more and more cybersecurity companies are investing in companies that service the home office market.
Yeah, I saw that also, and the light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, well, now maybe the new trend with cybersecurity will be, that home office specialization, if you will. Definitely see a market there, and maybe Cisco's kind of kicking itself now for getting out of it 5 years or so ago, whenever it was, because they were very well positioned for a long time, and it didn't happen for them. So, but that said, I think that we may see IT organizations now having to actually do kind of on-site setups of home offices to ensure that level of security that they can't guarantee otherwise. So I expect that's going to be a thing as we move forward. But working in hybrid environments, especially for, obviously not the executives, but the more kind of regular day-to-day workers, the worker bees, if you will. Is that something also that organizations will have their IT departments do, or is this going to be kind of a network in a box kind of idea where these guys will put together this, this is what you need to do to go home and set up this safe, secure wireless router and because if you're talking about an enterprise that has like 500 plus employees, that's a big job to make sure that each of those is going to be connected securely. So how are organizations going to do that? I know you don't know because you don't see into the future, but do you have an idea of some of the things that organizations are thinking about?
Yeah, customers have been echoing to us. They're going to go through a prioritization model. So they're going to focus on what they see as high priority and high risk environments, and they are going to take on some of those responsibilities in the work from home or home office sector. And then I think that they, as cloud technologies improve, and I think it's actually quite doable. There are. IT has to prioritize this, and I know it's another big thing on their plate to add on to, but it is, when I talk to organizations large and small, one of the things they tell me is that the movement towards cloud and SaaS is really enabling these types of, very distributed, architected environments. In some ways, the cloud is perfect for distributed environments, right? And so the home office just becomes another lot more distributed environment than they ever imagined. But I think the technologies are there to address it. Now it's just going to be in hyperscale is what we see.
So do you think that it's going to be as much about the technology as it is about the employee mindset or the level of education and awareness that employees have these days?
Oh yeah, and I think that goes hand in hand. I think that there's already, I'm hearing organizations are doing a lot of training with their employees, and I think that that's definitely going to be part of the solution, right? Technology can get you most of the way there, but I think that getting to that last mile, you still need your employees to be part of that solution.
Yeah. I would agree 100%. From a technology perspective, I've been hearing a lot about SD-WAN as a way for a lot of organizations to ensure a level of security of their data. And obviously, from an endpoint perspective, I'm not sure that SD-WAN really does kind of, deliver for endpoint. It's more about the network or the data in transit as far as I understand. But, are you seeing kind of a shift to new network architectures and new networking methodologies in the wake of the pandemic and this rush to keep this data secure from anywhere?
Yeah, I think there's two approaches. I think that there are some organizations that are going to take on the very very strong zero trust approach and really focus on the endpoint and really assume that everything in transit is likely, unsafe and focus on a lot of the zero trust principles that we see out there. Especially device trust, I think, is a huge thing because, a lot of organizations are struggling with device trust, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, using their personal devices. So they want to get a handle on that piece. I think that they feel like they can get quite a bit of the way there. I think that the next stage is to figure out, that still doesn't prevent, somebody from, war driving, as you call it, come to your home and potentially compromise your network and put in, all kinds of malware and keystroke loggers and all kinds of stuff into your home environment for say, an important executive. So those kinds of challenges, I think, will require a rethink of the network architecture in general. But I think that organizations are figuring out what that risk tolerance is and where they want to move towards, re-architecting for the long haul and, trying to figure out some of the more endpoint-driven technologies that are out there.
Awesome. Well, Bert, I wish you guys the best of luck. I know this is going to be a long journey, I think, for many organizations and kind of righting the security ship, if you will, as folks go back to work. So thank you very much for taking the time and having the conversation with me. I do appreciate it. It's very insightful, and it'll be interesting to see how well we get through this transition back to the office, even in a hybrid environment. So
yeah, thanks for having me on, Charlie.
No problem. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Monday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, I tell you about some of the great webinars we have coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And here are 3 that are coming up quickly in the hopes that you'll be able to mark your calendar and join us. The first one is called How Instacart Uses Datadog and AWS CloudWatch for Real-Time Monitoring. This one is happening tomorrow, Tuesday, April 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern. This one is sponsored by Datadog, and it is on DevOps.com. Visibility into performance of applications and their underlying cloud infrastructure is super important these days of digital transformation and customer experience. So to provide customers with lower latency access to their critical monitoring data, AWS recently released CloudWatch metric streams, which is a new capability that continuously pushes metrics to other AWS services and third-party monitoring platforms such as Datadog. So this webinar will include how CloudWatch metric streams enables what CloudWatch metric streams enables and why AWS developed it, how Datadog integrates with CloudWatch metric streams and other AWS services to provide comprehensive real-time visibility into an AWS environment, and how Instacart is using Datadog and AWS CloudWatch to monitor their grocery service during the pandemic, which was a period of unprecedented demand. It's going to be a good webinar. Hope you can join us for that one. The second one is called Cloud Ready, New Integrations for PagerDuty and Streamline Their Cloud Migration while also minimizing the impact to their customers. So some of the few integrations they'll be covering include PagerDuty for Amazon DevOps Guru, which leverages machine learning enabled application health information to provide real-time signal to action capabilities. PagerDuty for AWS Control Tower, which extends Control Tower guardrail notifications to their existing incident management and compliance alerting processes, and PagerDuty for Amazon Event Bridge Quick Start, which allows building unique and business critical functions for Event Bridge to help ops teams set up Lambda-driven updates to their AWS ecosystem even faster. Very, very interesting topic for this webinar, especially for those who are using AWS. All right, the last webinar is called Cyber Attacks from the Open Source Perspective. This one is also happening Wednesday, April 28th. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It is sponsored by WhiteSource. As we all know, that 2021 is quickly becoming known as the year of open source supply chain attacks, with an ever-growing number of hackers leveraging the increasing use of open source during software development to distribute those malicious packages and exploit known vulnerabilities. So this webinar will take a look at a simple framework to the open source vulnerability management challenge, and a few ways to secure the software supply chain and reduce potential risk. This one is definitely worth checking out. We all know how vulnerable open source code it's proven it's become over the last year or so, especially as organizations have increased their digital transformation efforts, and security sometimes is falling by the wayside as a part of that, or at least it's been reduced dramatically. So this is a great webinar to check out if your organization has had any open source code issues with security and or just a look at the market in general. So good stuff there. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview for this time around. I'll be back with you tomorrow with a brand new batch for you. Until then, have a great day. Please stay safe.
Hey, thanks, Charlene. Those were two great interviews, good news roundup, as well as, wow, what a great lineup of webinars we have this week. Up next is Jeff Morris, Vice President of Product and Solutions Marketing for Couchbase, around a recent survey that they've done on the impact of COVID-19 on IT.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Jeff Morris, who is the Vice President of Product and Solutions Marketing for Couchbase. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Mike.
You guys just launched this rather large survey looking into how people are doing with their digital business transformation initiatives. Maybe you walk us through that a little bit in terms of the high points, and most importantly, what surprised you?
Well, so yeah, we've run this survey for the last 3 years. This is our third year running it. And it's targeted at about 450 worldwide CIOs and architects. And it's geared towards identifying what, their current concerns are. And those concerns end up being things like, how ready are you, or how far along are you in migrating to cloud solutions? How likely are you to adopt databases as a service? And what are the important areas to focus on right now, given current market conditions? You can imagine, of course, the impact of the pandemic, really called out a lot of really interesting items in this particular survey. Mostly that the pandemic created an opportunity for these architects and CIOs to drive forward on digital transformation exercises that they had planned, but they took the opportunity to step on the gas and accelerate them. And we've seen that roughly 2/3 of these, and then when they're asked about the challenges that they face when they're doing this, is what are the core things that are either held you back or are holding you back right now? They come in at things like somewhere in the area of 55 to 60%. We're always saying, it's the difficulty to unwind my relational or my legacy systems is a big concern. The desire to keep my development skills or the skills of my people, and reuse those is a concern. I don't want to have to go through very steep learning curves in order to move forward. And the changing nature of what user behaviors has occurred, where all the users went decentralized, is one of the big drivers. So help me get into a better consumer experience or a better digital transformation experience along the way, and help me do it inexpensively. So get me into the cloud. Those were the big, kind of the essence of the big highlights. But some other ones were, like I said, the motivation to keep going or to speed up, their existing sets of projects and plans. I think was pretty telling.
What's your sense of the number of people who put their foot on the gas versus others that I know retreated? They basically said, we'll just put our head in the sand and we'll wait till next year.
Well, the retreat was, or let's do nothing kind of thing. It's like a third, right? A third are really going to accelerate. The second third are not changing their plans at all, right? They're moving forward at the same pace as they were. And then the lower third was, yes, we're easing back. And, that may very well, I haven't done a slice of this by, industry, but that may very, very well be that their businesses are dramatically affected by last year. And, they didn't have any choice but to pull back. The interesting thing that we did see, in some of our other research, in addition to this survey, was that there was an initial pullback, and then by August, summertime, that's when everything really started opening up in terms of IT realizing we actually can take the opportunity to invest more in core IT projects, and business is not necessarily suffering from that.
What's your sense of the level of stress that the people who are going forward are experiencing? Because there's no guarantee that any of these digital initiatives are going to work per se. So are they confident, or do you have any sense of, are they panicking, or are they just kind of waiting and see what happens?
I think they're confident, right? Because I think, because I think the challenge that they're facing of, I've got to, the confidence comes from a high degree of motivation. I think I would characterize it as, they've been reticent in the past to break the systems of record kinds of applications, but now they have no choice, right? Because user experiences, like I said, went decentralized, where new application drivers, like, we have to support curbside pickup and mobile pickup, but we don't have a mobile application right now. I think they recognize that that motivation, while might be somewhat intimidating, I think it's also inspiring. That they know that as they do move forward, they do improve user experiences, personalization experiences, online catalog kind of experiences, that they will end up being successful, and their customers will continue to come back. There's one of our customer examples is we picked up an airline last year, about a third of the way through the pandemic, and what they decided to do was redo the baggage tracking system, because there's no baggage to go and track right now. So they had the people available, and and always had the problem on backlog, but that was the fact that they didn't have to continuously maintain the system at the moment gave them the opportunity to go and start to rebuild it.
What's your sense of, are people really ripping and replacing legacy databases, or are they adding new types of databases alongside those? And it's more of a polyglot kind of experience these days. What is the level of consolidation, and how are people going about that?
Well, it's interesting. I think that the phase one of moving to cloud was pick something non-mission critical, right, and just try and lift and shift it. So let's not mess with the underpinnings or the design of it. And I think even Amazon behaved that way, early on, where their polyglot database set of offerings, right, where everything is, a discrete system or service, just is perpetuating kind of the state of the art of, the older state of the art, versus something like what Couchbase does, or many of the other NoSQL vendors are doing, is investing in and building out multi-model kinds of databases to eliminate the interface problems that you have all the time, right? If you've got to add search to your document database system, you've got an interface issue, and in order to add in Elasticsearch or Lucene or something like that. Whereas there's systems like mine that end up having full text search built in, or have the flexibility, the schema flexibility of a JSON foundation, right, allows the application to control the database rather than the database to dictate what the application is allowed to do. That flexibility driver is really a big deal for customers. But then once you get that flexibility and the application itself works, then you need performance, right? And that's where taking on in-memory processing and very high performant key value store capabilities in memory are kind of the next driver as you kind of walk your way down this evolutionary path. Good news is that systems like ours, they include all of those capabilities. They include an analytics service. They include mobile functions. So you can end up building, use one data platform as your foundation, but still get all of those core capabilities that you're your users or your downstream users are going to need. It's interesting to us that the requirements that end up driving a lot of these applications, like if you're carrying and tracking a user account, and you're adding or modifying its profile because you want to know what they're doing and what their likes and dislikes are, et cetera. One of the newer things is, do they have a COVID inoculation or not? Right, because I can't get into the venue unless I am, or get onto the airplane unless I am eventually. And modifying that on the fly through the application is highly desirable, and that's one of the nice things about having, like I said, the JSON schema under, or schema optional kind of capabilities underneath. But for every one of those polyglot systems, there was a requirement in front of that drove the development team to go and figure out, how am I going to solve this if I'm going to satisfy that user need? And I think that's one of the real interesting things going on right now in the NoSQL space, is how these vendors are consolidating their technologies to support those things.
Because the more interfaces I have, the more likely things are to go wrong. But as you think this through for a minute, much of the legacy applications that people built were batch-oriented. They kind of sitting on a relational database somewhere. And it feels like the digital processes that people are building are more near real time. They require that mobile interface. So are people really appreciating that it's really a fundamentally different kind of IT architecture to enable a lot of this stuff?
Yeah, that's very, very true. That, to your point of, is it a lift and shift, or is it a lift and augment kind of exercise? In order to maintain kind of, let's say, continuity, right? The lift part is, you really want to, you'd hope to have that of just, can I move the core data set into the cloud without breaking anything? Can I map even can a NoSQL system map the schema structure of a relational database and then allow the team to start from there? Right, I can do that. But then the moving forward, as you said, it's then the requirements are going to evolve and going to change, and gaining some of those, you're going to want to add that mobility. Your performance question is certainly pertinent. Is if your users are now digitized and mobile, then the amount of interactions that are going on between a user and what they're, if you're presenting a product to them, or services or tickets or something like that, that interaction is going to drive a lot of data exchange back and forth before the user actually invokes a transaction and makes a purchase. Just imagine the way that we the way we search for hotel rooms or airline tickets or concert tickets kind of thing is the convenience of being able to pick my seat is pretty awesome, but the amount of interaction that has to go on between that user and that data processing system increased a lot, and so having a real-time processor, having a mobile capabilities that can sync data as the internet is available, but still operate when the internet is not. Those are kind of the new generation requirements that we're seeing and supporting.
Do you think we're moving back to this whole notion of I guess, we had a huge conversation in the last 5 years about big data. And as interesting as that may be, I wonder if that is a legacy thought process in itself, and we should be moving more towards this notion of the right data in the right place at the right time. And we're kind of need to think about data as an independent abstraction apart from the applications that created it.
So kitchen sinking the data, and creating this monstrous pile of it didn't didn't bear fruit as much as I think the industry wanted 5 years ago. I completely agree with that. And yes, we see that the real challenge is get the data to the point of consumption, right, of where it's going to be consumed and used, is the more interesting problem, and the more useful problem, right? Is can I from my mobile device, and as smart environments get build themselves out. There's some really cool kind of problems that lays out, right? Imagine, we have customers that have built smart environments on, in buildings and in cruise ships and the like. And what they're actually doing is they've set up their user sensor kind of device, right? Identifying the user's phone as as the connection mechanism. And then they place sensors, right, like your Nest thermometer or your thermostat or your Alexa device knows when you're in the room or not. And so you have like a fixed position device, and then you've got people working their way around and through that environment, and gaining or offering intelligence back to that user. It's that kind of processing that's much more interesting than, should we dump all of the log data into a centralized system and then ponder over that with high-speed analytic queries or MPP analytic queries. It's what can you do to serve that user experience in the moment that it's happening. So back to your original assessment of that's a real-time problem. That's a data in the right place kind of problem. And it's a distributed or decentralized data processing problem. Those are hard, right? But there's stuff like us that end up solving for that.
One of the things we've seen is developers are exercising a lot more influence over what database gets selected. They are, in some instances, they're trying to end run a DBA because they just want to take something and build something and see if it works. And then it gets brought into the environment and it scales from there. At the same time, though, we do have these data pipelines that people are trying to build, and they have to feed those applications. And we've seen the rise of data engineering. How do you think all this is going to come together? We have DevOps on one side and data pipelines on the other side, and a bunch of engineering and some developers, and it's shake and bake. So
CI/CD, delivery of everything, and elastic scaling of the system inside and out, so that you can draw back the processing power over the weekend when nobody's online. There's lots of really interesting challenges, in this. What we're seeing is, our customers want, and the developers themselves, they want, choices with regard to, what they're able to do with the database, right? They do want to control. They don't want to interact with the DBAs anymore. They do want to be able to have the autonomy for the application they're working on to manipulate the data that it's using. And, and that's a perfect NoSQL, kind of answer to that problem. But then beyond that, what they want is the, let's iterate and fail fast kind of capabilities that, cloud native technologies that, Lambdas and AWS are, ultimately, microservices are ultimately going to end up helping the system out. The data processing challenge to that, is actually pretty cool in that, databases typically need to be stateful, and a lot of times microservices aren't. And how do you end up making sure that, and bridging that gap so that the data is available to the microservice when it needs to be processed, but then it's persistent and durable when the microservice, isn't asking for it. So there are, like I said, that's an interesting data engineering problem. It's an interesting data platform management kind of problem. But I think what's going to end up driving the data engineering side of this, though, is the proliferation and continuous integration of the different sourcing systems that can contribute to that. I'll keep characterizing that highly personalized customer experience, right? If I have, as an enterprise, if I have information in Salesforce and I need to marry that up with, data in Zendesk, that's an awesome data engineering problem that the data engineer is going to go and say, this is the data that I need to supply to this customer experience application, and the intelligent systems that are powering that. And then, finally, the other fun area is going to be, and I think the area where the developer is going to end up really shining is in designing artificial intelligence systems and using machine learning and making, their contribution be, the cleverness of, what can they figure out or offer in that user experience that you hadn't have thought of before. And that's back to the original part of the question. That's what's going to require that, quick iteration of development is let me try it, see if it works. If it doesn't, let me move on. And that's all, much, much easier in cloud systems.
It's one thing to hook up a few pipelines. It's quite another thing to make sure they stay there, right?
They stay there, they stay working, and yeah.
Do you think that as we look at the survey and we look at COVID and the whole era, that we're going to look back at this as some sort of seminal moment in the evolution of IT, or was it already happening before COVID and it just got accelerated?
I think there's going to be some seminal moment at epiphanies coming out, that will come out of this, because one of them from the user behavior standpoint is the amount of organizations that are deciding remote work is fine, right? When that was companies were very reticent to go and allow that, right? They like the face-to-face. They like the ability. My old man, used to have a thing of, if I don't see you in the office, I don't think you're working, right? There's just that human nature kind of perception. So the success of video stuff, the success of this, hugely remote workforce, and organizations realizing that means I don't have to, maintain a gargantuan real estate lease, right? I can actually reinvest that in the operations of the company and not suffer from it. I think those are going to end up driving, the seminal moment notion. And what's going to end up really coming out of that is this new generation of applications in support of it. Right, we're going to find, back to the, we're going to find the smart environment kind of mesh environments are going to be everywhere, right? You already see the ideas that are going on in your household, or going on with your cable provider, or going on with, even Uber's two-way phone in an Uber, right? Is a pretty clever smart environment, but. And casinos are doing it already. Hotels will start to do it. Vacation services and experience services are all, either doing it right now or, we're going to continue that. I think that's going to, keep going into, think of what's going to happen next after the QR code based menu that we've all been dealing with. Right. And some of us are like, oh, yeah, I don't mind ordering on my phone. It's easy. And other people just, can't stand the need to dive into technology and just want the paper menu. But even that kind of experience, those are are driving new application requirements. So, I think we are going to have sort of a roaring 20s kind of in IT for application development, coming out of last year that that we can anticipate a little bit, but it's going to keep going.
In a lot of ways, we've just been experimenting, and we'll see what happens from here.
Exactly.
Jeff, hey, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, Mike, my pleasure. Great seeing you again.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Many thanks to the folks at Couchbase and Jeff Morris. Guys, believe it or not, that was a quick 3 hours or more. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of TechStrong TV. We'll be back tomorrow with more fresh content, so don't miss that. But until then, this is Alan Schimmel from MediaOps TechStrong TV saying be safe, be well, be strong, TechStrong. We'll see you tomorrow.